People hold different people to different standards. No shit. There's a reason why we make fun of Republicans that get caught being gay. It's not because we hate gay people, and it's not because we would hold like other people like to account for being gay, or it's not like we are like, it's because Republicans that are specifically anti-homosexual or anti-gay in their agenda that get caught being gay, that's like a pretty hypocritical, funny thing, right? There's two types of hypocrisy that you're looking at, okay? There's two types of hypocrisy. One, hypocrisy of ideals is like not good. You can't have that because it means that your system is inconsistent, which means that it's absurd, right? We have to have like a consistent set of ideals by which we strive for, okay? Now, hypocritical behavior, right? Nobody's perfect, okay? And sometimes we don't live up to our ideals, okay?
Because
everybody's like this.
100%.
That's why they're ideals. We don't always live up to them, okay? However, you can't say that just because sometimes people are hypocritically in a behavioral sense that we can accept a hypocrisy of ideals. That doesn't carry over, right? Like, people can act irrationally, but that doesn't mean that we accept irrationality, right? You can't do that because without rationality, everything necessarily becomes absurd.
Just
keep
post
doing
on
it.
Twitter.
I don't know why you keep referring to that.
It was quite a mess. I really, really wanted that to go differently. I really was not expecting that to go the way that it was. I was hoping that was going to go significantly better. My DM to him is, I do not want to debate. I just wanted to have a conversation about people's moral responsibility for cash and shit like that, and whether or not we can put somebody up. And he kept saying, well, people that say arguments like you do this and this. And it's like, dude, you're talking to me, man. There's a lot of people that might think that some people's opinion who might be advocating that we do more with the resources we have are saying like socialism is win no house, or socialism is win poor. And I feel like this is kind of we're missing each other.
Maybe.
Well, yeah. Okay. So I at least want to come from a position of like, I think that we could be doing more when we have an excess of resources. And I think we ought to be doing more in order to further political causes, in order to bettering, our community and stuff like that. And to my knowledge, you are of the position that this is more of a, for all the dank memes that might get posted, a subarogatory position more than anything. Like, it would be nice for us to do this, but we have no moral obligation to go out of our way to do like a lot of like, let's say, funding of canvassing or what have you, if we're a political streamer or what have you, and we have excess resources, correct? Or
Yeah. Well, I think it's good if we do it, of course. It seems odd to me, the idea, whether we're talking about ideology or access, to reshift our moral framework for what a person should be expected to do, not just like in accordance with what they could do, but also like how we treat that conversationally. Or to put it another way, if a person is I guess we have to use this as an example, but if a person like makes their living advocating for socialist shit on social media, and keeps doing it over and over and gets really successful doing it, makes a lot more money, at what point do they switch from being a positive representation for the movement because of what they're advocating for to being a negative one because they spend too much of their money on houses or whatever? I think there's a really ambiguous gradient there, and the best thing that we can really do is we can just encourage people to do as much as possible with the resources they have. But that's not really what the discourse is about, right? It's about moral condemnation, which is where I think my main issue comes out.
Right. So if we're talking about like moral condemnation and like, I think that when we're talking about holding people to a certain standard and where exactly we're talking about like moral obligations and what people ought to, be like doing with their resources and what have you, and whether or not I can condemn somebody for having excess and not spending that excess or using that excess, whether it be capital itself or money itself or influence. I think we could look at either one. So maybe I could be more amicable to any idea when it comes down to money or what have you. And we could start from a position of influence and then work our way to money and see how we get there. So when I'm looking at things...
Do you mind if I try something a little different with this conversation?
Go for it.
So the central concern here is about hypocrisy, right? So
not necessarily for me, at least.
Okay, then not necessarily hypocrisy, but I think you know, are you a socialist?
No, I'm not. I'm a
Okay.
Socdem.
So, as somebody who would consider himself a socialist, it seems like the person who should be mad first and foremost, like here, is probably myself, right? So I guess I'd have to ask you, you know, why should I be upset? What, like, because people, I've seen this from everyone, like, you know, Destiny, Ben Shapiro, or whatever, where they're like, you know, I don't care about
Nice.
people making a lot of money and buying big houses, but socialists would. And I'm sitting there as a socialist saying, well, I'm not, so should I be offended? Like, make the argument for me to be offended, you know?
Right. So I think it comes down to if somebody has at least, I don't know, I don't really view it as an offense thing. It's more of if people are able to accumulate
I feel like
potentially
about
infinite resources from perpetuating an idea that they stand for a political cause, and I don't even think this has to do exclusively with socialism, but like perpetuate the idea that they stand for a political cause, at what point can I say that, like, you know, talk is cheap? You know, when does the talk become the walk, or is there no such, or is the talk the walk in and of itself, right? Like,
Well, that's my question to you, right? Well, the talk is the walk when it comes to, like, being a political pundit, right? Like, Tucker Carlson isn't dangerous because part of his money goes to, like, promoting Republican candidates. He's dangerous because he has a platform that tens of millions of people listen to. So, I mean, talking is walking when we're talking about political advocacy, because advocacy is largely a vocal process. But when it comes to, like, at what point can you expect to do more? I think there is a good question there. A lot of leftists, for example, are upset with leftists in electoral systems who take up space, you know? That's one of the central criticisms of the Democratic Party. The fact that, you know, they're better than the Republicans, sure, but they take up space. They become the left opposition party, meaning that you're removing sort of cultural, social, and political space for a genuinely left-leaning party. I think there's some legitimacy to that argument. You have to talk about what you're losing, what's being taken away. And in the case of Hasan, we aren't really losing anything. There's not a, what would you call it? A much of a cost to benefit analysis. The larger he gets, the more he speaks, the more people listen to him, the happier I get. It's very nice to see that the largest streamer who talks politics in the Western world is a socialist, even if I hate him and want to be larger than him. So,
sure.
Right. So that's my perspective when I look at this stuff. Now, by the way, I do think that Hasan should be doing more with this. I think that at his size, he could be doing unfathomable good with fundraising and stuff like that, you know? But it's about how you approach it. If your approach is like, socialist, hypocrite, big house, socialism is win no house, yada yada, we're not really facilitating any positive changes within the movement. We're just looking for an excuse to attack a socialist we don't like. And Lord knows I see plenty of that in this discourse. But if you want to be affirmative, positive, reaffirming, you know, you're doing good, but you could do better. That's an attitude I like.
Okay, so I guess then what is a moral obligation that you would set for somebody like Hasan? Like, is there any moral obligations that he has to hold up to at all?
System survey complete.
I mean, I guess I'd like it if he didn't murder or rape people. How fundamental do you want me to
That's
start?
the.
Right. So, like, I guess as a political pundit of socialism, or I guess we can do of being on the left at all. Like, what moral obligations do I have as a political pundit on the left? Do I have none whatsoever?
Well, in a purely utilitarian sense, my only real answer is that I always want him to contribute like a net positive utility to political discourse, right?
Pure
Which I feel
utilitarianism.
He does through his side. I don't agree with all of his takes on you. I don't think that he's always educated on the stuff that he speaks about. But as a net, you know, if we were to choose sort of the archetypical frat boy politics news pundit, you know, I would certainly rather him be Hasan than some, you know, edgy centrist or even like a progressive liberal like Philip DeFranco.
Right, and so I'm just wondering, I guess, from my perspective, I don't know why we would set the bar so low, and is where I'm at. I feel like that bar is set really, really low, and we do ourselves a disservice by setting it so low. I feel like asking for very simple
So Ahrelevant
things
is
like
pro rape and murder.
once
That's what
a
I'm
year
hearing.
doing a fundraiser that
But I
you
do
don't
ask
even
for
have
that.
to. Sure, but as a moral obligation.
What do you do if he doesn't meet that obligation?
I would say that you ought to do that, and that it is bad for you to not do it.
Well, sure, but I mean, that's utilitarianism 101, right? Like, do good
Okay.
things, don't
Stop
do bad
using
things.
philosophy
What should we do,
terms.
like, socially?
That's
What
not
should the
utilitarian. That's
social
every moral
consequences
system.
be
Don't
to
do
not
bad
that?
things, do good
So you
things.
would
That's what
say
good
that it is a
means. This is
bad
literally
thing to do?
circular.
Sure, to not do that fundraiser thing.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, in terms of like the distinction between doing a bad thing and not doing a good thing, it can be kind of fuzzy, right? Like it's a bad thing to not save a drowning child. And
Sure.
it's a good thing to do it. So the absence of a good action sometimes can be considered in and of itself a bad action.
Right. And so, yeah, allow me to be a little bit more specific when I'm using the word morally, a moral obligation, right? So like I'm using what I've at least picked up as your kind of position on a moral obligation versus a supererogatory thing, right? Supererogatory being like you're going out of your way, you're doing something good that like you have no obligation to do. Nobody was expecting it of you.
Fuck
but you
whoever
went above
taught
and beyond.
Vaush that word.
Congratulations,
Oh my
thumbs up,
god.
right?
Yeah.
And what I'd consider to be a moral obligation is what you need to do before you are committing an action that is bad. You need to do this, otherwise you are doing something bad, right?
Yeah.
That's the way that I consider it.
I guess the more that I think about it, you know, when I tried to start out with this stuff, I was told that utilitarians don't actually have a way of distinguishing between supererogatory and obligatory behavior. That when you get right down to it, you can make as many overarching or like, superseding systems as you want, but a utilitarian will never actually have a definitive answer for questions like that. It's just try to do good things and try not to do bad things. All questions as to what's obligatory or supererogatory are kind of relative, right? Is it obligatory that you give money to charity? Well, probably not many people would say that. It's supererogatory. But what if you make billions? At what dollar amount exactly does that distinction arise when it becomes necessary as opposed to it being simply a thing you can do that is good? In the absence of a definitive answer, all I can really say is that I think that we should, as a general rule, encourage people to do good when they can.
Fuck you for
and
saying
discourage people from
utilitarianism
doing
a
bad
few
when they
times
can.
5 years ago.
Well, I
You're
don't
responsible
think
for
that
this.
it's like
now
something
everyone
that
uses it
there
because
may,
they think
just
it makes
because
them
there is
sound
gray
like
area,
you.
that doesn't mean that we
sorry.
have to make an appeal to that gray area being so absolute that we throw out the entire concept of a morally obligatory action.
What do we
so
get?
I think
What do we get from the moral obligatory language relative to what I'm using? Because I'm agreeing with you. We should encourage him to change his behavior on that. And in terms of affecting a better outcome, that's the best you're going to get. What I'm suggesting is the most effective way of ameliorating the problem you're describing, is it not?
I would disagree. I would think in effect that what you have is the reason why I use morally obligatory is because I can condemn somebody for not participating in an action that I consider to be morally obligatory. That's really the difference. Saying that like, oh well, you're doing what you need to do, which is just, you know, say whatever we consider to be, you know, propagating socialism to a, you know, thumbs up degree, right? And I don't want to hard stick on socialism. This applies to all different political ideologies, right? You're promoting that ideology. However, right, like you taking in you're promoting the ideology of socialism, but socialism in and of itself doesn't say that you have to like go above and beyond and do all this charity stuff, but like we can hold them to that standard through a moral obligation, so that way we can condemn them when they do not meet it, because otherwise I'm just saying, hey, you know what, it'd be nice if you did all of this stuff, but you're not wrong for not doing any of it.
Well, why would a socialist want to do that?
Well, because moral condemnation is something that should be taken seriously. Generally speaking,
Because
it
I'm
is.
putting
But all the
100%.
people engaging in this behavior, the people attacking Hasan for this, that, and the other, you know, they're not socialists. Overwhelmingly, it's conservatives and liberals doing this, which suggests to me that the attitude you're advocating for here is not actually in the best interest of our movement. It sounds like it's in the best of interest of our movement because you're encouraging things like consistency, good optics, self-checking, but in reality, it just seems like a thinly veiled effort at attacking people that you don't like on the left. You say it's not about hypocrisy, but do we have these conversations about non-socialists? I mean, there are tons of wealthy celebrities out there who have pet social projects that they don't donate millions and millions
It's not
of dollars
hypocrisy
to.
if they're not
And
a
at what
socialist,
moment
right?
is
That's
that
the whole
passive
point.
Choice in game that I'd rather
It's
watch
something we
Diablo
say,
fucking to
maybe
instead
they
of
could do that
Ungolalo.
then. But with Hasan, this is a critical moral failing that has to be the subject of months of discourse. You see?
Yeah, so allow me to ameliorate that. I think it's because in a lot of instances, unironically, there's a lot of people who I would actually point to as models for going above and beyond that exist outside of you know, this specifically, I guess Hasan. I really don't want to attack him specifically, but like even you, I would agree, go above and beyond in certain areas where I don't believe that this moral condemnation would apply to you. Your consistent fundraising, at least your outspoken desire to participate in direct action, and what have you. I wouldn't. Right? Yeah. So I wouldn't apply this criticism to you. However, I think we can hold other people to a higher standard, and this discourse has been spawned off of like, you know, again, Hasan. And so I think we can hold him to a higher standard, like even just a standard of, again, doing maybe one fundraiser a year, right? Or what have you. And I think we ought to push that kind of a standard over and over again. But to address your point specifically about non-socialist people targeting socialist people for this, I don't disagree. There's a lot of people that throw shit at socialists just because they think like socialist means you have no money. But I also think that there are people that think like me on this, where it's like, damn, it really kind of sucks that we don't really see, you know, fundraising, we don't see canvassing, we don't see many of these things coming from specific people that talk about politics. And that ought change. We ought to hold people to a higher standard who are promoting these ideas and things like that. We ought to hold them to a higher standard, because if people like Hasan aren't going to go out of their way and support canvassing, who is, right? Who are we expecting to fund canvassing, to get people politically motivated, to get people politically involved, if not people like Hasan? Who else are we expecting to do? Like,
well, I guess, like, to me, ultimately, this does still reside on an attack on hypocrisy, which just doesn't register that much in my framework. When it comes to, like, well, who should be doing these good things? The answer to me is all of us.
It doesn't register because he doesn't care about being a hypocrite.
Socialist should be doing advocacy for the working class any more than the filthiest capitalist pig. I think that all of us should be doing it. I don't necessarily know if there's some heightened... Oh, is this a fucking Mal room? Holy shit. I'm sorry, guys. I didn't even notice that. That's good. I didn't even... to me, the idea that, like, people should be held to a higher standard if they actually advocate for these positions, in theory, it's good. You know, it's conceptually valid, and I think there's some, you know, some worth to it. I wouldn't deny that. But in practice, it just seems like, you know, the ability to attack people who you disagree with, which is why these criticisms are all coming from not the left. Like, we don't do this with capitalists, right? Like, if we were like, you know...
This is the whole point. If you hold yourself to a higher standard, then that, of course, does open you up to more attacks. But, like, I mean, what's the next step? Should we all just become, like, heroin addicts? Because, like, there's no standards for that, right? Like, I could show up at some place, like... I don't have the obligation to shower, to take care of myself, to not be an asshole, because I was like, bro, I'm a heroin addict, okay? Don't project onto me your personal responsibilities and what you perceive as failings, okay? Because, bro, I'm a heroin addict. This is what I do. Like, yeah, of course, if you hold yourself to a higher ideal or a different ideal, there's going to be a different set of standards that are going to be morally forced on you. That's like basic 101 everything. Yeah, I don't...
The fact that he's a socialist wouldn't even be a part of the argument being made here, but it is every time.
I can disagree with that, and I think I can synthesize why it is also, like, him being a socialist is also relevant. But to touch on your previous point about, like, Rachel Maddow and all that stuff, the part of the reason why I talk about specifically Twitch streamers in regards to this, and to some degree some YouTubers, is because that's the people that I have the most access to, the most connection with, the people whose communities I run in the most, the people who I can affect to some degree. I could agree that most political pundits should do these things. Most political pundits should do.
I agree that they should, but there's a difference between should doing something and morally condemning a person who doesn't.
So, no, that's what should means, Vaush, but...
If you had... If you were like a New York Times, like, you know, columnist or something, can you honestly tell me that you would be dedicating any significant portion of time to, like, writing out the dozens and hundreds of major political pundits who have a higher net worth than Hasan, and saying that, you know, if this person was really believed in higher taxes, then they wouldn't list this as a business deduction. Hold on. It's rhetorical. The answer is no. You wouldn't. Nobody would. There's something particular about socialism and about Hasan and about this discourse on Twitch that is facilitating a thoroughly unproductive conversation.
So No.
Why is it so important to hold socialists to a higher standard? Does not most people have values that they fail to live up to? It's not about failing to live up to anything. It's about, like, obviously you can never live up to your ideals. That's why they're ideals. But you try to, right? But the thing, here's like the killer question for Vaush, and I don't think I've ever gotten a good answer to this. What is the difference in your mind between a socialist and a capitalist living in a capitalist economy? Because in my mind, the socialist would be somebody that would act more in accordance with socialist principles. So maybe they would try to reduce the amount of exploitation, be a more fair, like boss, maybe give some control of his business, right? He would do these types of things. It would make sense. But in Vaush's world, there's absolutely no difference between a socialist and a capitalist because both of them have to be a slave to the system. Like so like, what is the difference? If there's no difference, well then who the fuck cares if you're a socialist or a capitalist?
Or trying to
That's like the definition of
catch up
grifting.
with other capitalist streamers. And this is something that wildly amazes me in regards to paying editors and what have you. The fact that it took so long to get a rev share model from Hasan in a similar capacity that Destiny's had for years.
And why not criticize him for that? I think that's a perfectly salient thing too.
And I have. And I think that these are salient criticisms myself. The fact that
it's very salient.
I still don't
It
think
could be so
Hasan's
much more
mods are
salient
being
if you would
paid,
ameliorate.
which I see no reason why they wouldn't be, right?
Your dissatisfaction with my
in comparison to like
inadequacies.
Carnage, right? Who, to my knowledge, stopped taking donations and now has his donation link route directly to his mod team.
Well,
like,
okay.
why is...
So what you're describing right now has nothing to do with socialism. It has to do with...
I disagree.
No, I fully agree. Socialism is about a broader social model which reorients the relationship between the workers and the means of production. Modding is considered volunteer work in pretty much every online community. To pay your mods is a wonderful thing. However, don't you think this comes off as a little bit toothless and spite-oriented? Where it's like, well, here's another person who pays their mods. Hasan doesn't. How can you say to me this isn't about hypocrisy when you're very clearly targeting Hasan? Like, wait, hold on. The essential argument here is Hasan is pro-worker, so we should make a ruckus about it anytime Hasan isn't the most pro-worker person in his field. Anytime anybody else does anything more kind, it's a mark against him.
So it's not. All right? What it is I think people should be paid if... So the reason why I believe that it is against what I consider to be what socialism stands for is I believe a core tenet of socialism is paying people for labor that they provide for you.
What about mutual aid and volunteer work?
Hasan doesn't do any of that either.
Mutual aid and volunteer work has to do with like community organizing of a democratic origin, no? Like towards democratic means, no? Like establishing...
Mutual aid? I mean, it can be just as simple as volunteer work.
Volunteer work for like feeding homeless. I don't think like volunteer work feeding homeless is equivalent to like volunteering to be on Hasan's mod team.
Don't you think that socialists should be paying people who give their time towards bettering the community with mutual aid?
I mean, if they, sure, why not?
Sure, I agree. We should all be doing these nice things. Why should I be angry if a person doesn't?
Well, I'm trying to make the argument specifically about paying people that do labor for you when I was talking about the mod team, right? So people who do labor for you, is it not like, I don't think I'm obtuse for saying that like a really big part of socialism is paying people that do labor for you if you profit off of that labor, correct?
I mean, it's really more about...
How do you feel about Tesla HQ leaving California for Texas?
Abolition of
a lot of conservatives are chalking this up as proof that red states have better policies.
Yeah, I feel like that's... I don't feel like that's
Probably
much
just
of
the
a
cost of living
stretch, right? Is like that. I don't feel like I'm doing socialism is win no house.
I have to
right?
caution because capitalism is all about like unrestricted free enterprise and market competition. But I wouldn't get angry at a capitalist anytime they donated something or anytime they bought something from a subsidized industry or whatever. If your willingness to impugn people for hypocrisy is as ubiquitous as you do a thing which in some context doesn't align with the reality of the perfect society you want to live in, then we would all be fucked. But Hasan is the only one who gets attacked for this.
Hold on, but because we don't do that because there's a lot of people that don't have the means to be able to avoid that. That's the key problem.
Buying from subsidized industries? I think that's totally
I don't know. I don't have the...
Oh no, shut up, Vaush.
From Walmart? What do you mean? I have to buy
Everybody
shirts
can
from
afford
Walmart. I have to
Whole
buy,
Foods.
like all of my goods from Walmart. I don't have the money to not do that. Hasan does. Hasan has the money to pay his mods. You know, I do have the money to pay like my editors and stuff like that. So
do you have any spare money whatsoever?
Yeah, I do.
Oh.
Socialism makes moral assertions.
Oh my God, he's so
that should
obtuse.
inherently make the actions of millionaire socialists more scrutinized.
So, is your argument supposed to be the arbitrary nature of how much money I believe is necessary before we can give it to people?
There's a definition for this fallacy. I don't know what it is. It'd be nice to have the debate bro term for it. But some people will make this argument that let me give you this equivalent, okay? Some people will say that like if something is arbitrary, it doesn't exist. People do this with gender arguments. Vaush is doing it right now, like, oh, well, I can't drop out, right? This is the equivalent of this, okay? I am in Nebraska and I walk over to an Iowan and I hold a gun to their head and I was like, all right, Iowan, where does your state start and my state end? And they're like, oh, well, I mean, like, this is the border. Show me. And it's like, well, I mean, it's like around here. I don't want to know where it's around. I want to know exactly where the border is. Well, I mean, it probably goes back and forth. Like, it probably depends on where exactly. So there is no border. Nebraska and Iowa are the exact same thing. There's no difference between the two. Because there's a fuzziness at the edge here, the two things are inseparable and unrecognizable. Yeah, it's like Loki's wager, right? Loki makes a gamble with some dwarves, I think, or some shit. I don't remember. And he gambles his head and he loses. And they go to cut his head off. And he's like, okay, you can cut my head off. That was the bet. But you can't cut a fraction of my neck off. Only the head. And then when they go to line up the cut, they realize, well, I don't know where the neck ends and the head begins. So he walks. And it's like, okay, like, but we have heads and we have necks, you know? Ugh, it's just so irritating to hear him get away with this stupid shit over and over again.
Setting right now seems to be incredibly arbitrary and fueled by a particular dislike for the person, which is why earlier I said you would never do this for other people. People don't do this for other people. We don't.
Okay, he gets his mouth sewn shut.
And we don't do this to regular political pundits. It's socialists. It's socialists who get these.
I thought this was in a Shakespeare play. Yeah, it was the really brainless solution that Portia had, I think. When she was dressed up as a judge, when Shylock wanted to win his bet against Antonio, I think it was something about like he gets to take like a pound of flesh, but he's not allowed to take any blood. And then he realizes, oh God, I can't take a pound of flesh. I'm fucked because there's going to be blood. And then they all made fun of him, called him a Jew, and made him convert to Christianity or some shit, and ended the play. And I was like, okay, yeah.
This is the same argument that I had with the vegans. And like with the vegans, it feels like they're more motivated by feeling better than the people they dislike than they are by making an affirmative change. Which is why I'm okay with the good vegans. The ones who say, hey, maybe try not eating meat on Tuesdays. Maybe we could cook this meal together. Affirmative arguments that change people's minds, not just an excuse to feel better than the people who you think aren't living up to their principles.
I feel like if anybody's attributing...
Wait, I'm not making this up, you motherfuckers. As the court grants Shylock his bond and Antonio prepares for Shylock's knife, Portia deftly appropriates Shylock's argument for a specific performance. She says that the contract allows Shylock to remove only the flesh, not the blood of Antonio. Thus, if Shylock were to shed any drop of Antonio's blood, his lands and goods would be forfeited under Venetian laws. She tells him that he must cut precisely 1 pound of flesh, no more, no less. She advised him that if the scale do turn, but in the estimation of a hair, thou deest, and all thy goods are confiscated. Defeated, Shylock consents to accept Bassanio's offer of money for the defaulted bond. First his offer to pay the bond thrice, which Portia rebuffs, telling him to take his bond and then merely the principal. Do they actually make him become a Christian, or they make fun of his... I don't remember if they... Oh yeah, I think they do. Antonio also asks that for this favor, Shylock convert to Christianity and bequeath his entire estate to Lorenzo and Jessica. This is a fucking weird play, dude. I hate Shakespeare. God, how fucking boring with this shit.
Tendency for people to use these arguments against socialists. Now, I'm impugning people broadly here because there's been mainstream attacks against Hasan for stuff like this. But you are, I think, participating.
When did you learn about this? We did Merchant of Venice, I think, my freshman year of high school.
There's a reason why we're not having this conversation about some random capitalist YouTuber who hasn't spent enough money donating to, like, centrist Democrat causes, you know? We don't go up to, like, random giant centrists online and go, like, why haven't you, you know, donated to Joe Manchin or whatever? This is very specifically a thing that people do to socialists.
I hate that he gets away with this so many times. I know he's too scared to talk to me because his arguments are such dog shit. Like, bro, People hold different people to different standards. No shit. There's a reason why we make fun of Republicans that get caught being gay. It's not because we hate gay people, and it's not because we would hold like other people like to account for being gay, or it's not like we were like, it's because Republicans that are specifically anti-homosexual or anti-gay in their agenda that get caught being gay, that's like a pretty hypocritical, funny thing, right? His whole argument here is just like so ridiculously stupid. And it's like, God, fuck, but nobody ever like calls him out on it. It drives me crazy. Like, well, why don't we call on centrists for their hypocrisy for not donating? Well, because centrists aren't literally trying to reorient our entire economic system while simultaneously condemning every single capitalist for furthering the system, right? Like, under your paradigm, Jeff Bezos could literally say, well, I'm a socialist, guys, but what can I do? I'm just thriving under capitalism, right? Like, it doesn't make sense to say this. It's so stupid.
Socialists. That would be something I'd be interested in knowing. It's not just you, friend. It's like everyone. There's a reason for that.
That's what I've said. I've said this. Wait, hold on. So I've said that, like, I would apply this to everybody on the political spectrum that does not participate in what I would consider to be many of these actions that I've listed so far.
Well, everyone says that, but we see who gets the headlines, right?
Okay, can you point me to a specific person you're looking for me to morally condemn for this shit? I mean, you pointed me in a direction, and I already agree, but, like, I don't think I'm gonna make headway to Rachel Maddow.
I think the arguments that you're making right now are pretty much universally applicable against any kind of pundit or newscaster.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I don't think I'm gonna make headway with Rachel Maddow, though.
Okay, well, let's be fair. You're not with Hasan either, right? Even I couldn't make headway with Hasan, and I'm the guy directly beneath him in terms of size.
Hold on. But I can contribute to a narrative that is portrayed in the space that Hasan is in, and avoid people from making arguments I would consider to be bad or just not well informed on what we could be making and pushing people to use their power effectively.
How about Bastia?
What about Bastia?
Bastia makes more money than I do. Do you know of any public efforts he's made to raise money for any pro-neoliberal causes or any donations he's made to said candidates?
Wait, did he just say Bastia makes more money than he does? Why would he lie like that? Wait, did he just say that?
As much money as you, right? They don't make 1/5 of as much money as you.
Oh, well, it seems that he makes a decent amount of money. I mean, do you think that he's doing enough to live by his principles, or do you think he's just...
I think it means through his lawyer job. It doesn't matter. How much money do you guys think lawyers make? It's not, I'm sorry, but it's not. I don't think it's as much as you guys think it is. So in California, the median lawyer salary is $170K, which is good. It's good, but lawyers aren't bringing in like 400, 500K a year, okay? Vaush is easily out earning Bastia. Absolutely.
Area that you were referencing before, and you're lumping in like average people or people like me or my mother who make like fucking 30K a year, all right? You know, I wouldn't lump us in.
We're not talking about 30K.
Because you're trying to say that, like, well, this could be applied to anybody. It can't. I'm talking about people with excess, people who are making like $1 million a year surplus is what I'm talking about, right? When you're making that kind of money,
why not 500,000?
Well, this is what I mean. You're making appeals to like the exact precise money, and you're saying because I cannot root some objective, quantifiable, precise point therefore you're throwing away the entire concept of
good job,
maybe
Ahrelevant.
if you're making $1 million surplus a year, that you can afford to pay a mod $5
then why not,
a week.
If we're just choosing an arbitrary line, then why not 10 million? I don't think Hasan makes 10 million a year.
Sure, if you legitimately want to stake your opinion at 10 million, I will fully take that. I will 100% take that. If you commit, like somebody makes $10 million, let's say you make $10 million in the next year or whatever, and you stake that, sure. I just think that, like, not a ridiculous point is $1 million surplus. And part of the reason why I use this amount of money is because, like, if you look at how much money you can make off of that money, just for instance being in a account, acquiring interest from the markets.
So sounds closer to 10 million here than 1 million a year.
$100,000 a year from just
I think he's on the lower end. So I think he's a bit south of 5 million a year.
After inflation. Like, that is an unfathomable amount of money to the average person. When you make so much money, no, but that's like at that point, right? You don't have to work to live. You work 1 year and then you live the rest of your life.
These seems to me like tangential arguments at most.
So the reason
fully
why
aware that he's extremely wealthy. He's the largest political streamer in the history of the English-speaking world. It's very impressive.
Okay. So the reason why I'm making appeals to this is because I think that that is a fair metric to hold. That if you're making so much money that you only have to do your job for 1 year, then you never have to work for a single day for the rest of your life. Do you agree that's probably a fair metric to say that, like, yeah, maybe there could be some resource spread that could happen?
There could always be some resource spread that could happen. Do you think I don't advocate?
No,
I advocate for my chatters to donate whenever I'm doing a fundraiser stream. Do you think that I would stop making that request of them because they make less than $1 million a year? Of course not.
I'm not saying that
we should all do.
I'm not saying that it's not something that we should all do. What I'm saying is at some point we can easily say that, yeah, at this level of resource accumulation and income, because I want to divorce income from wealth, because if he just had like $3 million, fucking $10 million or what have you, just sitting inside of a fucking account, right? Like, hey, listen, I'm not too sure about that, right? Income is a lot more like, you know, that's something that you can grab onto in comparison to something that might be a little bit more slippery.
Why not
right?
just advocate for everyone to do it if it's within their means?
Because I agree. So that's what I'm trying to prove is what is in your means. And I think the in your means, when you're talking about making so much money that you never have to work for the rest of your life, I think that is a fair metric for in your means. Do you agree or disagree?
I think, well, sure, but I think the bar for in your means is well below that. We don't say that a person can only donate if they're making like the median U.S. income every single month, right? I mean,
and Vaush, I'm not trying to make the argument that that's the level that we have to go with donate, but we've already made headway. We agree that he's at a level where he can donate. My point.
But I never disagreed with that, though.
Okay, but my point off of that is that if we agree that there is a level of excess that like he can donate or what have you, that is quite far away from like in any way, shape, or form hurting him if he were to donate, then like why wouldn't we advocate that somebody who believes in these ideas, believes in the mutual aid, mobilization of a viewer base or what have you, actually do these things like fundraise? Well, no, advocate for it in a way that we can talk about like moral obligation. Like why is it that you're asking
me to commit to a position that I don't think my ethical foundation has a way of accurately describing. You have engaged in an unfathomable degree of arbitrariety over the course of this conversation. We both know, and just to be clear how like hemming we are in this, okay? We both know that the standards you're applying right now are applicable to virtually every large political pundit, okay? Very few of them go off to live in like some 2-bedroom house while spending their money on social causes.
Sure.
Or even anything close to that, you know?
I'm not advocating for that.
So I know, well, you should be. Because the criticism that I have is that this isn't actually about improving the world or about sort of enabling a better standard for political discourse. It's actually about finding a tangential way of accusing socialists of hypocrisy, which has been the sort of primary attack against them for a long time. Wait, hold on, please. You can't be upset with me for saying that because it does not escape me. I'm sure that if you were to spend even 5 minutes looking around, you could find plenty of capitalist YouTubers and Twitch streamers who fit easily within the monetary bounds you were describing, who do not publicly donate to the political causes they claim to support. But it's always Hasan. And, by the way, me. I don't get it as much as he does, but it does not escape me that the entire online media circuit is constantly obsessed with how every dollar is spent when it's held by a socialist. It ultimately is about hypocrisy. And to be honest, I just don't care about hypocrisy. I care about good and bad behavior.
You keep attributing things to me.
I'm
talking about the behavior that we typically see, and while I cannot
okay, let me do this real quick, okay? Hypocrisy, okay, there's 2 types of hypocrisy that you're looking at, okay? There's 2 types of hypocrisy. One, hypocrisy of ideals is like not good. You can't have that because it means that your system is inconsistent, which means that it's absurd, right? We have to have like a consistent set of ideals by which we strive for, okay? Now, hypocritical behavior, right? Nobody's perfect, okay? And sometimes we don't live up to our ideals, okay?
Because
everybody's like this.
100%.
That's why they're ideals. We don't always live up to them, okay? However, you can't say that just because sometimes people are hypocritically in a behavioral sense that we can accept a hypocrisy of ideals. That doesn't carry over, right? Like people can act irrationally, but that doesn't mean that we accept irrationality, right? You can't do that because without rationality, everything necessarily becomes absurd. This is stupid.
Discretionary income at the end of the year, something like that. I wouldn't have even
let's
applied this
go
to
with
you.
that number.
Well, that's what I heard that you said, discretionary after rent and everything like that. But anyway, like, I wouldn't even apply this to you. I'm talking about people with such an excess of money that, like, it's like not even realistic that they're like, because I think there's many arguments to be made that you could be saving your money for, like, in case you get banned permanently, which could be like,
that's why I save my money
now.
Yeah, that could be a very I think when you make the amount of money that Hasan makes where he could literally live the rest of his life off of 1 year's income, I think then I can start talking about, hey, you're probably not saving for a rainy day unless you're saving for a rainy day in a mansion, right? So, like, let's talk about perhaps, you know, ways that we can be more proactive with our political goals and what have you. I think that's a fair, realistic...
Something I talk about as well. What should we do when we morally condemn a person? Like, what's the practical... Do we say that, like, Hasan is bad now, even though they're contributing a net positive utility?
No.
Oh my god, dude, when he talks about utility, I just want my fucking asshole could turn fucking coal into diamonds. It's so cringe. Please stop. So are you saying that we can say that a behavior is bad, even though if a person's total overall contribution of utils to the moral landscape is positive? Are you going to tell me that a man that has delivered and saved the lives of 5 children can be condemned for raping a child? Are you going to tell me that even though his overall utility is positive, we're going to condemn one act? Yeah, of course you can condemn a bad behavior, even if the person overall is a good person. How black and white? How stupid is this thinking? Jesus.
Make that socialists never have to do anything with their money ever, and they can, in fact, just become a hyper-capitalist like Jeff Bezos after they're done because, hey, fuck it, it's their money. They earned it.
Well, I'm not talking about hyper-capitalist business ownership or being Jeff Bezos. I'm talking about being a Twitch streamer, right?
Right.
But if your position, if your position though is I don't really care how Hasan spends his money, then the answer to that would be yeah. A couple $1 million, whatever Hasan owns, is chump change compared to the voice that he has. The spending of his money is meaningless almost compared to what he could be doing with his platform.
I disagree.
Oh, sorry.
When we see actions like canvassing that was done in Georgia, I think that was crazy powerful. And
yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
But Hasan has the capability to finance that on a level that is
most
like
expensive
tenfold what happened before.
Well, that would mostly be an exercise of his
like a
voice
cheap
more
state.
so than his wealth.
Minnesota?
We have as streamers, we have a disproportionate amount of an audience relative to our wealth, you know?
Sure. I can work with that. I can work with you because I don't disagree with you.
Governor
My whole
races are
point
big,
has been about
big shit.
influence and wealth, right? And of course, I would hope that if he was going to do it, he'd probably pick up the tab. But I guess he doesn't have to.
Well,
but
on like booking hotels or something. I mean, depending on how many people there are there, like he could probably get like 5,000, 10,000 people out to like a district. I don't even know if he could pick up the tab.
Of course. Of course. But like those are details. I'm not expecting him to spend $3 million on this fucking shit, right? Or what have you. So I just want to make it clear that when I'm talking about moral condemnation, I'm not saying that we have to say Hasan is like the worst person ever or even that he's a bad person, but saying that what he is participating in is a bad action. He's doing something bad. He's not doing something good. He's doing something bad. And the reason why I think this is important is because part of the people that you are criticizing for having this condemnation of him or this criticism for him is coming from that position, that it is bad for him not to be using his resources and influence to be able to further causes. When we talk about things like fundraising.
When you were canvassed in Nebraska, do you know how big the opposition's canvassing groups were? They were like 4 or 5 people. We were easily, we were probably bigger than every single other canvassing group. No, hold on, I'm sorry. We were definitely larger than every single other canvassing group combined. Times 2, probably.
Person to get this. It just feels like if this was some, it feels like, wait, stop. You're going to accuse me of being bad faith here, but considering my main reservation with this entire issue is the fact that people will say this is a ubiquitous standard and then only socialists get attacked over it. The fact that you could apply this criticism to virtually any large political pundit in this country. Now, if that's a consistent standard that you want to hold, then you would be ubiquitous in your criticisms. And if that's the case, I think that's fine. And you can say that, but I know who gets videos made about them. Not from you, just you, but from everyone, you know? This is like one of those, it's like one of those things where I don't think you're being dishonest or anything like that at all. It's just, I think it's very clear that the hypocrisy element is the thing that drives this discourse. And that's the thing I'm least convinced by.
Okay, I don't, it's not about hypocrisy at all for me. I don't know how else to explain that.
You did earlier say hypocrisy was an element of it, didn't you?
I said hypocrisy was an element when it came to not paying the people that do labor for you. And I stand by that.
Shouldn't everyone pay those who do labor for you?
Especially socialists should, because it is a core tenet of socialism, is it not?
What? Why does that make any difference? Shouldn't they still do a good thing?
What?
Wait, okay. If it's a core tenet of the philosophy that you hold, you are held to a higher obligation to do that in comparison to somebody who doesn't have that as a core tenet of the philosophy.
No, everyone should do good things.
Okay.
Did you just say everyone should do good things? Yeah, that's what should means. That's what good means. Yes, thank you, Professor Vaush.
What you're describing right now is deontological.
Oh, God, stop using these words!
You're not the only one to do this. There is, as far as I understand, no way of approaching this issue from my perspective. From a utilitarian perspective, while valuing hypocrisy. Does a bad thing become good if it's done consistently? Does a good thing become bad if it's done hypocritically? How does that work?
No, it has to do with your ignorance relative to what you are doing, right? So this is where I was talking about like the hypocrisy and how people might address it and how I could better articulate it, I think, when it comes to this conversation. So the hypocrisy element, I think that of the people that aren't being just ridiculous about it, because I think there are people being ridiculous about it. There's an element of, I don't know how you can get to a point where in which you or not I, but more of like the individuals that might be making this argument, if I'm trying to be as good faith to the people making the hypocrisy argument as possible, that it is a mystery how you can get to the point where you're a socialist and you've been streaming for years and you've had back and forth, you've had debates, and you don't pay your editor. When you make 100,000.
Why do you only care about socialist?
At least $2. Right. And then I would extend this to mods as well. When you're making millions of dollars a year, just throw them a bone, okay? Just throw them anything.
Well, I think
just
that
give them
should be
something.
The idea of paying people for their labor is not a uniquely socialist concept.
It's not a uniquely socialist.
Dude, the relationship between labor and your capital is super part of the big socialist concept. The idea that every bit of money that you make as a capitalist owner is coming off the backs of your laborers, that is absolutely how can he be so dense? Well, the idea of paying a worker that's not unique to socialism. That's like saying that's like being critical of a Republican fucking a guy, and he's like, well, actually, the concept of a dick in the ass could actually occur within heterosexual relationships as well. So it's not unique, actually, to religion.
Negative effects about, let's say, a capitalist business structure, right? Let's say there's somebody who is a conservative and thinks that capitalism is really cool and welfare is cringe and shit like that, and thinks you should squeeze your employees for as much money as possible, and is ignorant to the
Do capitalists not know that it's nice to pay mods for volunteering in your chat? Are they ignorant of that? If I said that to them, do you think they'd give me
this convo
confused Tim Allen face, or
it's
I hope that this sounds really spiteful. I don't care. It's not spiteful. I just, when I see people that just say just unbelievably stupid shit, I just hope that people notice, because sometimes it drives me crazy. We're how does nobody see how fucking dumb this guy is? But I've gotten a lot of emails of people lately who are oh yeah, I used to watch Vaush a lot and I've seen a few of your conversations. The more I watch, I'm man, this guy is full of fucking shit. Jesus Christ.
Moral condemnation, who is that, because you got to keep in mind that person's ignorant of any kind of argument about exploitative labor and anything like that, in comparison to a socialist doing the exact same thing. Do you think that they're both equally morally condemnable for their actions, or do you think because one is ignorant of a system that exists that exploits people, do you think that that person is less morally condemnable than somebody that is knowingly exploiting their workforce and that they know is morally bad just for their own political gain? Because this is the difference between malice and ignorance.
You wrote the chair argument post. Well, thanks, Mothar.
If we're not talking about the utility derived from an action, then you're talking about what is it called?
Do you think Vaush is being willfully ignorant just to be slippery, though? No, I think he's just so high on his own farts that he just can't take a step back and be okay, what am I actually fucking arguing for here? What the fuck is the point of what we're talking about? I think he's just really into well, if we analyze the utility of the action that one undergoes, and then we compare it to the supposed hypocrisy that you attempt to elucidate between the capitalists and the socialists, then discoveries at the end of the day are unable to ameliorate the positions that you so claim to care.
I don't think that's an analogous comparison. First of all, the conditions of oppression are equally known to capitalists and to socialists.
That's not true. What?
Acceptable. Are you?
Wait,
sorry.
this is.
Wait, hold
on.
on.
Go ahead.
Capitalists are aware business owners, of the relationship they have between the money they make.
But they don't view that relationship as inherently exploitative.
Don't call it that. They call it profit, but they know what it is. They know what they're doing. They have a different moral perspective on whether or not they have the right to exploit people.
So that means that if they have a different moral perspective, then they have a different perspective on it, right? That's
whether or not that's something that they feel they should be able to participate in.
So we both know that this isn't a universal truth, because there are people that do participate in a more conservative outlook, but once they get more perspective, let's say read theory or whatever you consider, right? They become educated on the actual ways that this might be exploitative. You know this. You've talked about this.
Yeah,
you can get educated.
I just said that. You have an ethical restructuring in your head, but you're not ignorant as to what you're doing. If anything, I think that comparison would be most valid if you were talking about a purely Marxian concept, like alienation. Because that's something I wouldn't expect you to know about unless you had specifically read Marx. But the dynamics of a business and how surplus labor works is something that you would have to learn in order to operate a business.
But the outcomes
Likewise,
you can't say that that's really simple, Vaush. You know the outcomes of surplus labor and quote-unquote exploiting a workforce is not just simple as it seems. Oh yeah, these people shouldn't get this much money because I put forward the capital and stuff like that. It's not that simple. It's not like, well, anybody looking at it at a passing glance understands the full scope of it and how it works. You may not understand how these people live their life, what it feels like to be somebody that never had an opportunity to acquire that capital, what it feels like to be working class.
Now we're not talking about socialism. Now we're just talking about degree to which you can sympathize with the poor. And there are socialists who have no sympathy or empathy for people other than themselves. Socialism is just a political philosophy, not a degree of empathy for people.
What I'm referencing when it comes to the ignorance of some capital owners, when it comes to
where's the Thanos with the glove? Socialism can be whatever I want it to be, because now technically what Vaush just said is correct. Socialism is only a political philosophy, but goddamn if they don't wheel it out as some sound economic theory when they're talking economics, or if they wheel it out when they want to morally condemn other wealthy people as like some sort of moral philosophy as well, right? Like.
Actions, or do you disagree? So like maybe I could just reinstate this.
I think the way that we respond to these situations should be modified to enact the best outcomes possible. So if you think a person is acting out of malice or knowing ill intent, I think that you would respond to that situation differently, not because they're being hypocritical, but rather because it could procure different outcomes. Or to put it another way, there are also malicious capitalists, aren't there? It's not like the only people who can run a business ruthlessly while knowing they're procure them.
Procurement of those alternative outcomes.
There are capitalists who probably run their businesses with more malicious intent than many socialists who do. And those people aren't being hypocritical. The hypocrisy isn't the element there. The issue there is whatever way in which you can address their behavior that affects the best outcome.
Well,
and I think that my behavior affects the best outcome. My standard for this is we should encourage Hasan to do better with what he has, his money, his resources, his platform. But this, like, he's bad, I condemn him stuff, and the fact that this only gets thrown at people like Hasan, not just by you, but, you know, it does, seems to me like it's an effort from outside of the movement to destabilize it. Without ever challenging
fucking CIA, guys. Holy shit.
Okay, I mean, you could keep saying that. I mean, I'm not the one doing. I feel like that's just you're just constantly stating something to try and attribute it to me when that's not what I'm doing.
Do you think I'm attributing malice to you or pointing out a pattern? And do you disagree that the pattern
I feel like
exists?
I feel like you're pointing. The pattern exists outside of this conversation. I would say, from my perspective, I could understand if you believe that I'm like being bad faith.
I don't think you're being bad faith at all.
Okay, so then why constantly are you referencing this?
Well, because I'm
talking.
talking
Do you think Vaush believes what he says?
Well, you're essentially
or is
doing
he just
talking
adopted
my
his
opinion
stance
on
and
how to
refusing to
address
admit he's
a type
wrong?
of behavior in the socialist movement. And my answer to that is
not even in the socialist movement. Again, I preface this with political advocacy in general. When we're talking about political advocacy in general, this is what I'm talking about.
Okay, let me give you an example, I guess, of where I'm coming from here, right? Okay. So, imagine we were talking about cancel culture. So something I've talked about a lot. And imagine that you come on here to talk about the cancel culture lefties. Let's say you're a conservative, okay? I know you're not, but let's say.
Okay.
And you're talking about cancel culture lefties. And I'll agree with some of your points and disagree with a lot of other ones, you know. But at some point during that conversation, I'm going to have to bring up the fact that cancel culture as a talking point is always brought up to attack the left when the right does it as much, if not more. And then you would say, oh, well,
they used to, but they don't really have the power to anymore, I don't think.
We're just talking about me. Don't assign like broader intent based on the conversations you've had with other people. And I would say, okay, fair. But it's a little difficult for me to ignore the fact that this is overwhelmingly a talking point used against the left. And by agreeing with anything that you say, I'm implicitly reaffirming the idea that this is some kind of biased problem. And I notice when I look at your YouTube channel, Random Conservative Ahrelevant, that you only talk about cancel culture when the left does it and never when the right does it.
Okay, who was the last person the right successfully canceled? Does anybody know? What? I know that was it James Gunn, the Disney stuff? Oh, Kaepernick under Trump, for sure. Like, I don't think the right, when Trump was president, they could, but I don't think the right has much power to cancel people right now.
And have a conversation with on Twitch.
Vaush is
Dylan
just
Burns talks
destiny,
about
but
this
he has a
consistently, how
socialist tag
impossible
of
it is
1
to
month
find
delay on
conservatives
perspectives
to be
and
able to
thoughts.
talk about shit, because there's no conservative streamers. Like, that's just the facts. There's like fucking 3. Right? Like, I'm not going to be able to, I don't have a very large pool of people to be able to talk to. 1, and 2, I don't think that on Twitch politics, a lot of their opinions are very relevant. If you want to talk about overall whether or not they're relevant, absolutely. Like, they absolutely are. But then, like, I'm going to fall into the same pit that, like, everybody criticizes other people for, where, like, I guess I could debate Lauren Southern, but then I'm going to get fucking canceled for that because I'm platforming Lauren Southern.
You don't have to talk with people. Have you spoken with Hasan, or have you just talked about Hasan?
Nobody can talk with Hasan. What do you
well,
mean?
yeah, so who you can talk to has nothing to do with it. Hasan is as distant to you as Philip DeFranco is. You will never talk to him, and honest to God, I probably never will either. He is so big. But if I look at your YouTube channel, you don't post too often, but the 3 most recent videos are a rapid fire of Hasan hypocrisy stuff. I think, yeah. Hasan perpetuates white suburbs. Here's why. Hasan and LSF don't want you to see this meme. Hasan responds to Ben Shapiro. Whereas, and I know I'm not going to find any examples here of you calling out like Philip DeFranco or like any large news pundit, or even like some of the like larger, more apolitical leaning types. Hell, Video Game Donkey has talked about how he doesn't like Trump. Have we seen him put his money where his mouth is? I don't know. So with all of that being said, it does feel like we're all kind of leaning a little bit on the hypocrisy angle, which is one I just don't relate to. If your general prescription is we should make an effort to encourage political pundits to live by their principles, to donate their money, then I agree with you completely. I just go about it in a different way. I think we should be positive and affirmative because the alternative, like denouncing and like this person's bad and stuff, causes a lot of division and infighting, which is ultimately destructive to our movement. And my goal is always, of course, a strong socialist movement.
So then I'm just curious, because it genuinely feels like there's literally nothing I can do to convince you that I'm good faith at this point, so I'm giving up on that.
Wait. You have to stop doing that. I'm not accusing you of being bad faith. I'm accusing you of having biases, which we all have.
Okay, you are heavily implying that
I'm not implying anything. I've stated outright how I feel about this. I feel like the hypocrisy angle is the big one for you.
Is there something wrong with calling it hypocrisy? No. So the problem is that like, so Vaush is like way down on this like, what's the way to most effectively rhetorically ameliorate a problem? How do you solve an issue with somebody who has like bad behavior? And he doesn't like the idea of condemning that person outright. He likes taking a more gentle approach, kind of. Now, rhetorically, this is true, but the problem is this has nothing to do with hypocrisy. But he's mixed the context of these conversations up. So like, for instance, we probably don't want somebody to be preaching one thing and performing another action that's contrary to what they're preaching, right? In general, we don't want people to do that. Now, we can condemn them for their hypocrisy, but that condemnation doesn't have to take the form of like screeching at them or tweeting evil things at them or shouting at them, right? Our condemnation might be like a gentle suggestion of like, hey, it's probably not good when you do this. We could do better, right? That could be a condemnation of hypocrisy. But he can't separate like the optical world that he lives in from like these moral arguments that exist in a separate realm. These are different types of arguments. And it's all just like this smorgasbord? What am I looking for? Smorgasbord of like random things that he's got together. Yeah. and that's where I think that's why he's so hesitant to say like hypocrisy is bad or whatever.
You just said that maybe there would be a perverse incentive, and I just gave you examples of people that do it where they seem to be getting along just fine, and then you ran off and said that's me trying to say because other people do it, socialists do it. I'm not. I was just simply responding to the fact that other people do it and their channels seem to be fine.
Well, earlier in this conversation, you have explicitly said that the fact that other people pay their mods is an indication that Hasan should as well, and then just about 60 seconds ago, you said that we should expect people like Hasan to know to pay their mods. So I don't think it's bad faith of me to imply that you do think that other people paying their mods means that Hasan should also pay their mods. That seems like an explicit argument you were making, right?
Right. So when I brought up the initial, my initial statement about other people paying their mods, what I was talking about was the fact that I feel like we can often point to other people doing these X, Y, Z, and Z actions that we can draw influence from, and that we should copy what they're doing because it's a good thing to do. We can make this a moral standard, and I don't see a reason why we don't make it a moral standard. So I want to,
sure. Well, no, but that's no. But again, we're okay. So that's good. I think that's a good thing, but we should try to do it in a way that facilitates the best positive outcomes, right? I mean, we should.
That would be the utilitarian thing to do.
We're not going to disagree on that. And the only disagreement that we might have is which one of our positions facilitates the best outcomes. So my question to you is, if you
positions has been expressed by Ben Shapiro. I mean. You do know.
Do you really believe
argument?
my opinion was expressed by Ben Shapiro?
I think that an adjacent argument to it was. Ben Shapiro's argument was a lot stupider than the one you're giving right now, for sure, because it's Ben Shapiro.
Hold on.
The basic argument was that Hasan's a socialist.
Yesterday, I went into a restaurant. I saw you sit in the corner. I noticed you were drinking water. You know that Hitler drank water, right? You sick fuck. What is his argument?
His argument was that he shouldn't buy a house. That's his argument. That's not mine.
Well, that was being rooted in the broader criticism that you made, right? Because that thing that I just said, Hasan said, or sorry, that Ben Shapiro said, you said that because he's a socialist, he's, to be held to a different standard because of, well,
because he's a socialist. Yeah, no shit.
Ben Shapiro never got that specific. Okay,
so,
then
awareness, no, you can't just he's trying to say that he's completely bastardizing these ideas, trying to say if you believe in Marxism, that means you must donate all your money. Nowhere have I said that, and you attributing anything even adjacent to that, I think is incredibly bad faith.
Bad faith,
so
call him out.
The argument,
call him bad faith.
What I'm saying is that if you're a socialist, you have an understanding that labor ought to be compensated to a degree that many people, many capitalists, like especially like conservatives, may not have that same relationship. That your passion, that your fervor for the position that you believe that labor ought to be compensated is going to be drastically different than many other people. And
right,
I would attribute that.
Are the arguments that Ben Shapiro made.
No, it is not. Ben Shapiro's argument was that if you're a socialist, you should donate your money.
No,
it's entirely different.
His argument was that if you're a socialist, you have a different set of moral positions, and that you should live out. You should enact those moral positions.
And what was the way he argued you enact those moral positions, Vaush?
Your arguments weren't exactly the same.
Oh, Vaush running it back in real time.
What I'm saying is the way in which broadly this discourse is getting handled against Hasan, which is to say to morally condemn him, to say that he's being a hypocrite, etc., etc.
I'm not trying to...
Wait, hold on, wait, please, wait, stop. I'm getting tired of you playing the victim over things that I haven't said. You did both of those things. Both of the positions I just described to you and Ben Shapiro, you did. So stop pretending that I'm being in bad faith.
I'm not trying to say the way that
approaching this is reflective of a lot of denunciation Hasan gets from people who aren't interested in the
people in Vaush's chat are turning on him. Wait, really?
I am, because I'm part of it. So my only ask is that when addressing issues like this, we try to do so in a way which foments good outcomes rather than bad ones. And the outcomes we're seeing right now, and don't think I haven't seen your content, by the way, okay? I know how you talk about Hasan, and it's far from a hyper-measured analysis of his behavior. I'm not going to get into it any further than that, but don't think that I don't pop into your streams like I do everyone else. I know how you talk about him, okay? I think that it comes down to bias, and I think it comes down to an attempt at attack socialists in ways that people would not apply ubiquitously to other groups. So if we care about the health of socialism, which you don't, So I don't know why I should care about your...
If you guys aren't even trying to accomplish ubiquitous amelioration, I don't know what the fuck you guys are doing.
By definition, the health of socialist movements is defined by the likelihood of our victory. If you think that, like, if you don't want us to win, you can't by definition. Like,
what do you mean?
Do you want us to win?
That's completely incorrect. I would rather socialists win than anybody else besides soc dems. What do you mean?
Scientific breakthrough.
Is that true?
achieved.
What do you mean? Is that who the fuck else would I want to win?
Well, you would
Fascists.
want well, historically, soc dems will say we prefer the socialists to the fascists, but then they'll fight militantly against the socialists anyway.
Fascists.
Do you think you really?
Dude,
are
historically,
trying to say
fucking the first people socialists kill when they get in power are the other fucking socialists. What are you talking about?
Starting to wonder if you are participating in good faith. So listen to what I said again.
He's not good faith. We willed out the bad faith
Do you need a
argument.
break? Do you want some water to drink? What I
I would
said.
do fine without the yeah, that.
Okay, well, I would do fine without the fuming. What I said was, historically, socialists have aligned with soc dems on a lot of stuff, but there still tends to be a historical opposition between the groups. Now, I'm not saying you're going to go out there and fight Hasan physically. Historically, that dynamic between soc dems and socialists has tended to be more violent because that's how history is. So when I talk about the health of the socialist movement, you'll have to forgive me.
I feel like you could make a meme where it's like socialists fighting for power, and it's the guy standing in front of the tank with his arms up in Tiananmen. Was that Tiananmen Square? I think it was, right? And then it's like socialists once they have power, and it's like the guy in the tank. Like, bro, come on, get the fuck out of here.
That sort of foments broader bad faith criticism. You know?
Would you like me to explain why I think that socialism is a good number 2 compared to social democracy? Would you like me to explain? Would that help?
No, you're missing the point. That's not what I mean.
You're okay. So
Somebody make that meme for me so I can
appeal
tweet it,
to
please. Thank you.
history about how there has been historical precedent for soc dems siding with other parties, saying that they'll side with socialists, but siding with other parties. Cool. That's not me. You can make an appeal to history and talk about that if you'd like, or what have you. But I don't know why you're talking about that when you could just ask me my positions.
Because, hold on.
You're not in good faith. Hold on.
Because my main concern is that you're biased. Asking you about your positions.
Now you're biased and you're unable to tell me truthfully what you believe in, but I'm not calling you bad faith, okay?
Because he's being hypocritical thing is a argument widely used by anti-socialists or by people who are looking to attack Hasan or the movement in general. You've seen this all over right-wing media and liberal media, often done very spitefully. This was with the House thing and with the Twitch leaks thing. I mean, the idea that socialism, hypocrisy, they should do better isn't the central critique being made here. I think it very clearly is, right? So that tendency, that ideological through line, seems to be facilitating a lot of bad discourse.
Yeah, it's funny because, yeah, that is true. People will constantly say, like, socialists always, or liberals always side with fascists, liberals side. Okay, truthfully, only so many fascist regimes have even existed in history. Arguably only like 3 or 4 true fascist regimes, okay? And socialists sided with one. They literally carved up Poland with a fucking treaty to be fucking allies. It wasn't just a non-aggression pact. They were going for full-on fucking allies, okay? Go read the fucking pact. It wasn't just a, you don't hurt me, I won't hurt you. Okay, Jesus Christ, okay? Chill. You don't even have history on your side for this one.
Good thing we aren't doing? Do you do a bad thing when you don't give money to a homeless person when you walk down the street?
No, that's not how it works. So what we would do is we're talking about moral obligations, moral expectations given on your
How do you determine what a moral expectation is?
That's what we argue about it. We argue about it's ultimately arbitrary. All morals are arbitrary. We have to make some kind of definition or some kind of line in the sand that we draw, that we argue for, that we ought hold people up to. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to make an argument for why we ought to hold people up to this standard.
But I'm also advocating for that.
Okay, so
I'm saying it's superrogative.
Again, let's just actually get to it, right? So let's get to the core specific thing, right? Which is, what is the difference between a moral obligation and just saying, hey, that it would be better, you're doing good, it'd be better if you did
It's superrogative.
this, right?
That's the difference.
What's the core difference here?
I have no idea. I don't think there's any way to solve that within my
We
philosophical
have established a new
framework.
planet
So
of
if that's the case, then why would you shit on me for saying he's doing a bad thing? If it's like,
Unsolvable.
who cares? Like, there isn't really a substantial difference.
Well, there's a tremendously substantial difference, and it's the type of
What's that?
discourse that's produced. Like I said, this hypocrisy argument is being used by people as far right as fascists. To,
Oh my
attack
God.
Hassan.
The fascists, they're coming
So
for poor
we should probably
Hasan
focus on
and his
one that's,
$3 million
effective and
mansion.
pragmatic,
Oh
right?
no.
I mean, if
So,
we want to
if
we want to
you're-
like choose how to handle this, we should probably not choose the one that aligns us with like every bad actor in the world, right? We should
So
probably
then
choose another way.
your argument would then be against whatever argument you're attributing to me is specifically on a block. I think like the hypocrisy, argument that I'd be making about specifically paying people that do labor for you, I don't think that one is very widely held. I think you're just latching onto the word hypocrisy there. When we're talking about people,
So it's not about the specific
hold on.
argument. It's about
so
the
if-
idea that socialists should be held to a higher standard.
A different
Because the
standard.
because the practical consequence of what, first of all, because the fact that you think socialists should be held to a higher standard as opposed to a different standard is
Destiny
very odd.
Hitler hated
because you know what
communists as
socialists
much as
tend not to
Jews.
care about? Shoplifting. But you would never look.
Wait, every single person, different people have different ideologies that necessitate different standards that you're held up to, of course, right? I'm not going to sit here and talk to a non-vegan and say like, hey, why are you eating meat, you hypocrite? Well, no, they're held to different standards. Of course, different ideological groups are held to different standards. Standards are things that get us closer to our ideals, and different people have different ideals. There go, different people have different standards. Like, that's so obvious. I feel like stupid for even saying this out.
Like commodities behind like a price gate. Is like not something that the proletariat have a right to circumvent at the expense of corporate entities.
Wait,
Whatever possible.
Vaush, you've been fighting me on whether or not it's a socialist standard to pay people that do labor for you, but now you're about to say to me that a socialist standard is shoplifting? How are you going to try this?
No, oh my God. All right, hold on. We'll try this a little bit better, okay?
Uh-oh.
My point is that socialist standard isn't what I care about. I care about doing good and bad things. If you cared about holding people to the standards of their ideology, you wouldn't mind when people who are pro-rape raped, or when fascists did whatever the fuck they're up to. You obviously don't actually care about holding people to the standards of their own ideology.
No, it's two different criticisms. You can make criticisms of people being inconsistent while also simultaneously making criticisms about their ideology being bad. Just because somebody can be inconsistent within one ideology and their inconsistency favors our ideology doesn't make that person any less of a hypocrite. Oh my God, dude, we're conflating so many horrible arguments here. Oh God. I should have never touched moral philosophy on stream, guys. See, I told you, ethics is a waste of time. You know what? Meta ethics and normative and applied ethics is a waste of time. All of ethics is a waste of time. It was my fault. It was my bad. I take the L on this one. We should have never had these philosophy talks on stream. Okay? I damaged the discourse.
Let's get to defer to some sort of generalized mode of efficiency. Their moral claim isn't that they should exploit workers to the greatest extent or own private capital.
What a
to the
shit
greatest
meme.
extent.
Oh my God.
Their concern is just that they do whatever is most efficient for the making of business. But that's not really capitalism, right? Capitalism isn't just doing what's most efficient. There are a set of very specific positions on what is or is not acceptable within capitalism, which systems facilitate the best outcomes. But nobody gets mad at a capitalist for buying from industries that have been subsidized. This is one of the ways in which people have historically attacked socialists. You can't argue against our positions, so instead
It's murder. You fucked
hold
your
us
link
to a
up,
higher standard,
dumbass.
a monastic standard. We have
Monastic?
to be these, monks. We have to walk the world free of earthly desire. Because if you wanted to, you could say
Socialism is when no
Vaush.
house.
I
That's
noticed you
Vaush's
wear
whole argument.
$40 t-shirts.
You're ranting.
Wait, no,
Wait,
this is all,
please.
it's not a gish gallop. It's part of a central point.
No, I'm not. I'm just saying you're going off.
Do you-
All you need to do is ask me why do I hold socialists to the standards that I do.
I don't- but
and
I'm
I
not
can explain it to you in a second. If you're not interested in that, why are we even having this conversation?
Because the
If you're not willing-
conversation
if you
isn't
if you
about
want to
me.
have a conversation about some nebulous historical context or the thing that most of these people are talking about when they have this conversation, I don't know why you even chose to have this conversation.
Because the
with me.
conversation that I'm interested in isn't in me interviewing you on why you think X about Y. I'm interested in explaining to you why I prefer my way of handling this. That is to say, not this hypocrisy socialist angle.
But you haven't even asked me what my position is and why I hold a socialist to a different standard on this.
I don't care.
Yes, I have. Wait, you've answered that like a dozen times over the course of this. You've explained it.
Okay, can you explain to me why?
Because you think that a greater level of awareness over the potential wrong that you're doing means that you have a greater moral responsibility to avoid committing those actions. You've said that directly multiple times.
But that's true, Vaush. This is why, for instance, if a 10-year-old hits a 10-year-old, they're in more trouble than when a 2-year-old hits a 2-year-old. The awareness of your actions and wrongdoing, that is literally the definition of like moral agency. Things become moral agents when they're able to discern between right and wrong. It's literally the whole point of being a moral agent. This is why we don't hold people responsible that don't know better. Yes, of course. This is the whole reason why things like compatibilism exists, right? To escape like determinism is because if people were always going to do one thing and they couldn't choose between one or another, then how can we hold them morally responsible at all, right? Like this.
Somebody who didn't have any understanding and came to it from a position of ignorance.
And I don't think that's analogous to conversations like this, because you're not talking about a direct one-to-one action, a malicious behavior explicitly done with the intention of hurting a person. You're talking about a guy who made a lot of money live streaming, and far more, I imagine, than he ever expected. And now we're talking about, like, whether or not the amount that he's making means he should be doing more charity. We're reaching...
Yeah, you make it sound so stupid, but it's like... So now you're saying that a guy that's in a better position in life, just because he's in a better position in life, can afford to help those that need it? Like, you're telling me that a guy that makes like, I'm so curious. What was the name of that one religious guy with that mega church that didn't let people in when, was it when Katarina, with the floods happened? I think it was after that. I think this was years later. There was a name of the guy with the mega, Joel Osteen or whatever, Osteen. There was like, didn't he have a mega church? People were like, why don't you let people in? Like, Vaush is like, we don't ask people with 1-bedroom homes to let people in. Are you saying that just because this guy owns a mega church, you think that this guy should be allowed to, or should have a moral obligation to help other people? Like, yeah, no shit, of course. Was it Hurricane Harvey? Yeah.
Who makes about $60,000 a year, and he notices that I praise him for how good he's doing, but he only makes time to see his kids for about 2 hours a day, whereas if he didn't go to the pubs on weekends, he might have the ability to spend more time with them. Aren't I facilitating like bad behavior by not condemning them for that?
No, because I wouldn't put the moral responsibility on somebody who's like middle class to have to go out of their way to do that. Luxury, like going to
their kids.
Yeah, you need to be able to relax as an adult.
Wait, if you're middle class, you wouldn't say that people should be held to a certain standard when it comes to taking care of their kids and spending time with them?
Love your work. Man,
they absolutely can. Thanks. I'm just saying that it's not as cut and dry as somebody who...
Wait, so things not being cut and dry
not cut and dry.
You become increasingly uncomfortable with setting hard lines for what is or is not acceptable?
Are you going to let me answer your hypothetical?
Nope.
I think you did.
Okay, so I didn't get all the way through it. Okay, so somebody going to a pub, that could be the way that they relax. That could be necessary for them to be able to continuously acquire income, to be able to make the household stay afloat, right? And that might be necessary to keep the kid fed. And if that is the case, right, then so be it. That's unfortunate, but that's the way that we let it ride. I don't think that is an apt comparison to like somebody who is making all of this money, who has all of this influence, who could just do a fundraiser. Not even like, I'm not even saying he needs to spend any money, Vaush. Well, the reason why I'm saying that he could do a fundraiser is because he has all of the means to, and this is divorce compared to the person at the pub, right? Somebody who's making $60,000 a year can't afford.
Has the means to spend more time with their kids, I think.
Okay, so if you want to make the argument, yeah, you could be spending more time with your kid or what have you, but the means to be able to spend more times with your kid there is significantly less than somebody who streams almost every fucking day and could afford to one day of the year just do a fundraiser to be able to help people out. He doesn't even have to spend any money himself, but just politically activate his audience to be able to do so.
Do you think one is acceptable? Like, why only one?
Apparently one, I'm having to fight tooth and nail to have a dude do one, so apparently,
your fighting has no relationship to what he chooses to do or not, so in reality...
That's not what we're talking about. Like, getting people to do things through, like, being able to say, hey, you know what, I think that, like, you choosing to not participate in fundraisers at X, Y, and Z rate is not something that we should encourage, and it's, something I would consider to be bad. I think that absolutely can push people to want to do things like fundraise or what have you. I think that 100% can. I think moral
Yeah,
condemnation can absolutely do that.
Okay, how's it working out so far? Because the entire right media sphere did this line with Hasan, and all it did was make him bigger, more popular, got him more money, and he tripled down in all of his positions. Is it working for you?
I think the reason why the right failed on this is because they actually make really shit arguments. I don't know if you were expecting me to fall into that trap, saying that he needs to give away 80% of his money. I'm not even making that argument, right? That's not what I'm making. To capitulate to the right, he'd have to give away his fucking house, his fucking home.
Wait, where are the
and,
artisan jobs, guys?
Give away his mother. No, I'm not gonna do that.
Do you think if he had just watched your streams, he would have changed his behavior?
Are you really doing this, man?
No,
is this really your bit?
My point
is this really your bit? I'm just a small streamer, and you're just making an appeal to...
You're falling back on behavior.
Is that what you're doing?
Can you let me respond?
It is Forge Worlds and the jobs switch.
Behavior that doesn't seem to do anything.
Where am I
than,
making?
Circle jerk to your mixed audience of DGGers over Hasan's hypocrisy. When Destiny has made equally stupid arguments himself in the past about socialist hypocrisy house. Wait, stop.
Wait, stop.
You keep talking about what behavior you can influence in Hasan, but that's literally not even a factor here. You and I can't influence him. He's beyond us. What we're talking about right now is what behaviors we can normalize in our communities. And as far as I can tell from you, as evidenced by your unwillingness to commit to a hard position on whether dads should spend time with their kids, or rather than spend time at the pub. It seems like you
Where am I producing consumer goods at all?
Really
I don't
difficult
understand.
to make strict moral lines when talking about supererogatory behavior or how much you can really expect of a person. And it also seems like your mode of behavior, your way of analyzing this, doesn't produce any better results than what I do, but it does lend itself to the same types of arguments that the right uses to attack the left all the time. So by any utilitarian standard, I would have to arrive at the conclusion that, unfortunately, yes, my less toxic, more productive, less infighty, less divisive, way of addressing these issues, when we ultimately agree, by the way, on the same outcomes.
How do I change the world type
the better
again?
one to adopt.
Okay, so because it doesn't feel like we're gonna make headway on that. I want to know, do you think that there's any comparable difference between what where you're advocating for that people do and just somebody posting on Twitter?
Well, I have a larger platform.
Mount Duckersy and Flipban, why are there so many?
Okay, a large platform on Twitter. A large Twitter account. Do you think that what you're doing is the equivalent of a large Twitter account?
Or a random person on Twitter?
No, what I'm saying is, do you think that the outcomes with which and what you are doing and what you are advocating that people ought do is pretty much the same thing as somebody just shit posting that capitalism is cringe on Twitter?
Well, no. I mean, I try to put forward better arguments.
Factory world.
That's okay, a good argumented shit post about how capitalism is cringe on Twitter. Do you think you're doing the same level of political advocacy as that?
If they were able to reach the same number of people and engage people to the same extent, then yeah, sure.
Okay, then do you think that we should probably hold people to a higher standard than somebody shit posting about capitalism on Twitter?
What's wrong with people shit posting about capitalism on Twitter? How would
it doesn't really affect
survive?
Much. Well, I think socialism only survives if we actually put people to work and make sure that we actually I'm trying to make so I use comments like we because I consider some measure of left unity
Who's
a
we?
thing. So I genuinely like the idea of socialists and stuff, and again, they're my number 2 option. I'm rooting for them, okay? I'm not trying to leave them out there in the dust. So I would say we because I very much see us going hand in hand on this one. So that's why I'm using the word we.
Well,
I don't want to be like you versus us.
It's like every question.
We agree on 99% of things.
99% of what?
SocDems and socialists agree on so many things.
Sure, but I hate to bring it up, but I've noticed this odd trend of people with whom I agree on almost everything, and then I look at them and they spend all their time shitting on the left and misrepresenting our positions. So it's not about what we agree on; it's about what we spend our time doing.
Damn.
I'm assuming that's supposed to be a jab at me.
No, that would be Destiny.
Oh, okay.
It's the reason why people expect blood whenever we meet each other at a conference, but it turns out we agree on almost everything, and he's just incredibly, insanely spiteful online.
No, it's that Vaush hides his power level hard fucking core because he's too busy trying to fucking maintain his fucking posture than to actually have the balls to disagree with me anything publicly, okay? Vaush in public is the fucking, the most milquetoast fucking SocDem impersonator in the fucking universe, okay? I tried so hard on that panel to get either of those motherfuckers. Dude, the libertarian guy to the right was giving me more fight. Every single time I would try to disagree, it's like, well, actually, I totally disagree with this. So like, yeah, actually, I actually agree with Destiny too. Get the fuck out of here, all right? You're a coward, okay? That's the problem, all right? It's not that I don't hide anything, okay? In real life, I'm the exact same motherfucker. Jesus.
It's somebody shit posting on Twitter because I think that that's how we lose. We lose if we don't set a higher standard for, like, let's say fundraising or canvassing and things like that. That's what we need to do to be able to set a higher standard.
If we can do it. But I think my outcome, my way of handling this will produce that more.
So do you think like people who make a bunch of money are going to wake up one day and just like realize that, like, because you're saying, hey, you could be doing better, they're going to actually do something? Or like, what do you
think they're going to wake up one day to find people shit talking them online and change their mind? Yeah, I think that like high quality and good faith discourse from people who are sympathetic to them and are just looking to like share some mutual improvement is going to move people over far more than like laughing at them and saying they're a hypocrite or whatever, right?
Wow. Base.
Right, so I'm not laughing at them or saying that they're a hypocrite. I've yet to do it here.
Well, I know it's moved me over. Lord knows I've changed some of my positions over the course of the time that I've been doing this, and never once has it been done by people online like accusing me of being a hypocrite because I'm this, that, or the other. It's always been like every single time people like sitting down and talking with me and making like a positive, you know, like what felt like a sympathetic and well-intentioned argument in my favor. And that does not even involve calling a person a hypocrite. I mean, that kind of just seals people off to you right to begin with.
I mean, if we could make that argument or that specifically, sure. I mean, everything that I've said in regards to like canvassing or fundraising has no hypocrisy. There's no hypocrisy angle there. The only thing that I even made even somewhat of an appeal to was in regards to paying people that do labor for you. That's the only thing that I made that argument to. But I'm just trying to specifically address, like, I think we could be doing significantly better than a shit posting Twitter account. I don't think that we should leave the canvassing up to the people who are just millionaires or what have you, or people that make less money than, you know, people who are some of our most affluent. I think it is a damn shame that we live in like a country where we, like one of the most wealthy countries, where we have some of the most wealthy people that we have access to be able to change the discourse around, and we advocate for them to do nothing. Like that, we have don't hold them to any kind of moral responsibility. We just say, "Hey."
I'm not saying they shouldn't do nothing. I'm just saying they don't have to.
Like
that's what he's about to say, guys.
We're just waiting for people to give us opportunities to canvass instead of creating our own opportunities to canvass and mobilize our viewer base or influence. And we're just hoping that somebody else does it, and then we can direct our audience in their direction. Why not do the advocacy ourselves? Why not advocate that we do that and by through moral responsibility
and the
whatever it takes.
That I disagree with.
Don't burn the bridge.
I have said on stream, and you can ask people in the chat, I've said multiple times, but I do think Hasan sits in his laurels, that he wants to be like a workaholic, like frat boy, like lean there and react Andy and never actually dip his toes in directly because he's, you know, I don't know if it's necessarily lazy because he streams 3 times as much as I do. It seems like more of a willingness to carve out his own niche and not to dilute that by like making himself adjacent to more traditional political organizing, which is what you would do through fundraising or like canvassing or that kind of stuff.
Do you think?
I don't think that's good. I don't think that's good. I think he should do better than that.
Is that me?
So do you think that by
Oh,
not...
Bits.
Because
Thank you for not putting on show and just being yourself.
that's where it sounds like we're at, right? Do you think that like it would not encourage people into the future to continue down the same path if we don't set a precedent that this is not something that we should do, that this is a bad thing to do?
Well, you can't, I mean, the distinction between when does it become a bad thing to not do a good thing is really something I don't have a strong moral answer for. The only thing that I can really do, and I don't want to like be boring when I say this or whatever, but the only thing that I can really do is just advocate for people to do good things. Anything, or discourage them from doing harmful things. Anything outside of that, like some kind of broader discussion on when you do a good thing so hard that you need to be expected to do another gooder thing or whatever, which is kind of what we're talking about here, right? There's not even any legitimacy to those arguments. Like I said earlier, I do think the Democratic Party takes up space by arguing against Republicans, but doing so from like a tepid neoliberal angle. I think they make it harder for real left parties to form. I'm not arguing against the philosophy of doing good things in ways that leaves open bad outcomes or anything like that. I just don't like the way this is handled. And keep in mind, we're talking about this in the most like sanitized way right now, you know? Like, I'm looking at your YouTube thing right now, and that YouTube short that you have is you like scream laughing at a video, which is basically saying that Hasan changed his principles when he made more money. Do you mind if I play that really quickly for my stream?
You can do what you want. Yeah, it's your stream.
Okay, really quickly. Okay, here.
Here we go, guys. Here it comes, guys.
The grossly affluent is a moral obscenity, and our economic system inevitably leads to oppressive and exploitative power hierarchies. Redistribution is the only ethical option. But now that I think about it a little more clearly, is a man not entitled to the sweat of his brow? I think I heard that in a video game once. And you know,
He literally did the meme, dude. He did the meme.
That is literally like, is a man not entitled to the sweat of his brow? Is a BioShock Andrew Ryan reference that is supposed to be libertarian, right? But actually, it is inherently socialist.
I mean, I won't deny that this is funny. That is true. However, I think the implication here is that Hasan changed his perspective on this because he got money, and I don't know if there's any way of demonstrating that, right?
Look at him laughing at
either.
Here's a question. How many streams has Hasan done laughing at people's houses since his $3 million house came out? There's a question.
Would clip that. And like,
I don't know. It just, cause this is like the tone of discourse that I see so often.
Sure.
You know?
So
Where it's
the tone of discourse.
At the end of the day,
It doesn't serve to ameliorate or elucidate any problems at all.
Look at the socialist stance, right?
If you want me to run down all of my grievances with Hasan, I can really quick, so that way you can have it all on the record, so that way you know exactly where I'm coming from. All right? So I think it is really shit how after the editor drama, he proceeded to talk about how he wanted to set up a co-op for his editors and the people running his YouTube. Then he proceeded to go on H3's podcast and then say he doesn't want to set up a co-op for his editors, not because it would be hard, which honestly, if he said that, yeah, that shit would be hard. Could you imagine trying to set up a co-op for like YouTube people? That sounds incredibly hard. Yeah, like I was fully expecting that. I would have accepted that hands down, walked away, been happy.
How is it hard to do that? What? Bro, if you can't even set up a co-op for a fucking 3-employee YouTube channel, how the fuck do you expect large businesses to do it?
I was like, I understand it, but like that's I really
there's
didn't
a legitimate
like that.
argument to be made there, right?
I think there is, but
the thing with a cooperative is that collective ownership is kind of the name of the game there. The problem though is that when you're like in a media org, like if you're a Twitch streamer or a YouTuber, you can never really have like a fair or equal share of what's done because there's one irreplaceable worker. You can replace editors, you can replace everyone, but you could never ever replace the person who's behind the camera. Or in front of the camera, I'm sorry. So in that case, a worker cooperative would only really be like a shared payment structure because in reality, there's no way for anyone other than the...
Imagine starting, now I understand Vaush doesn't know anything about the world and a lot of socialists don't, but like a lot of small business owners start things because they're like their passion projects, right? Now people don't understand. Imagine you start a small business for the first time in your life. You start like a bakery and you know, I guess you get workers together to do whatever, and now you have to give up. You're not even allowed to be a majority owner in your own like cute little bakery that you set up, or you haven't been able to. You're not allowed to be the majority owner in like maybe a little car shop you set up. Like you can't do that because that's all immoral because it's exploitation. Like, bro.
That he made and during the editor drama clearly showed that he had no understanding about actual like socialism at all. He made the argument about how he gave his editor a computer, and that meant he had the means of the production.
I remember that.
Yeah,
Wait,
so
yeah, I guess when I
different...
see that, I mostly just see that like Hasan's a dumb fuck who has his foot in his mouth 24/7. That's why he's so tall, you know, so he can reach and do the full fucking like wraparound. But well, I don't know, like if our argument is like editors should be paid like really well, I think that about everyone, not just Hasan. But nobody pays attention to the editors of other big YouTubers or Twitch streamers. They never even get talked about. It only gets talked about with like Hasan. It's like, so in a way, I think, I'm just saying, in a way, it feels like this behavior actually normalizes the bad behavior, because what it's essentially saying is that, hey guys, as long as you're not a socialist, nobody's gonna pay attention to whatever shit you're doing, you know? If you're a socialist, then you'll be scrutinized for it, and that's good, but if you're not, nobody will care, and if they do care, then you can just say like, whatever, free market, dude. Nobody will pay attention because it's not actually about affecting good behavior. It's about the hypocrisy argument.
So this again, I just want to address that specific.
I mean, a little.
So, not in my spheres, no. Like in the social democratic spheres, like the idea that like your editor should be paid rev share is like a commonality now, let alone paid at all. You have soc dems that make fucking $20 a month on stream paying their editors for videos and stuff like this. The trends are changing because of like we're saying that like you ought pay your editor. And I think that like that is definitely influencing people's decisions when they come to like talk about editor pay or what have you. And we're using examples and taking note of other places where we consider it might have failed, like for instance the Hasan editor drama or what have you. Right? I think there is real substantial change going on there when it comes to like people saying, hey, we ought do this, we ought not do this, and what have you. Like, I don't know, like you have so many people actively just like this is starting to become the norm, and that's something good.
Sure, but then hypocrisy should never come into it, right? It should always just be people should pay their editors more. And I'll believe that it's becoming normalized when I see non-socialists getting more flack for this on social media. The bias is so hard against socialists that Hasan got fucking like mainstream media coverage over it, which is wild. Like,
I don't disagree with that. Yeah, that shit is ridiculous. Like 90% of the people that are talking about this is talking about it in a trash way. I would never deny it. But the thing is, I don't know why that discourse needs to change in order for us, me and you, to have a conversation without all of that coming into play here. Like, I want to be able to have a conversation, and I can like keep going down some of the grievances that I have with Hasan or what have you, but like, that's more or less where it ends.
Yeah, well, again, keep in mind, I mean, I'm agreeing with the fundamental, like, position that you're holding here. The fundamental belief that you have that we should encourage good behavior, I mean, it's stupid to say, right, but that we should encourage good behavior, I completely agree with it. I think how you do it like matters a lot, though, and there are ways to do it that overlap with destructive elements of anti-left advocacy, and there are ways that...
Talking about destructive elements, now maybe you can argue Vaush has changed his position since then, but Vaush was actually the reason why, because Vaush was obsessed with Hasan. FYI, I was the person who encouraged Hasan's would-be editor to make public his exploitation. So at least, but now that was before Hasan was that was before Vaush was making a lot more money too, right? Maybe because this was like a little over a year ago, so... Man, I don't know, dude. Maybe what they say is true. Money changes people, huh?
Did you see me not pay attention to my health bar?
Oh, yeah. I thought you were playing hardcore. My fucking...
Destiny, to correct something you said earlier, it's a lot easier for bigger businesses to be co-ops because they can draw from a lot more profit to distribute amongst everyone. Smaller businesses have way more upfront / startup costs, and that complicates... Yes and no. So obviously the startup cost is a big thing. However... But you have to keep in mind, a big business turning into a co-op is hard too, because you're essentially expropriating capital from all of the owners. That's hard. That's really, really hard to do as well. So it's hard to start them, and it'll be hard to turn one into it, unless all the workers were able to buy into it. Or I think there's like a right of first purchase. There's like a name for this if owners leave a company, that workers have the opportunity to buy the company.
But if that's something you want to do, and if we can break bread on that, right? Like,
yeah, it's not.
But like,
at the end of the day,
I'm not using the hypocrisy. Is what.
Sometimes, I mean, okay, I understand how it can affect how you would respond to somebody's behavior, because if you think they're acting with like an element of malice, you might have to respond to them differently.
Yeah, because he's locked in my basement.
Different types of behavior require different types of responses. I get that. It's just with the actual underlying arguments. Can you understand like the perspective that I have on this, or the feeling that I have, where it seems like overwhelmingly this conversation is only being had because people are holding socialists to a higher standard than like any other group?
Well, yeah, I do. But I think in certain areas that makes sense based on the argument that I made previously, which is that they have a greater understanding of how labor is... Like, I mean, I don't think you would disagree that they have a greater understanding of how labor ought to be and is actively influenced by people that purchase it, trade it, or what have you, right?
Yeah, but isn't the technical consequence of holding people to a higher standard, if they're in the correct political movement, to discourage people from entering that political movement?
Yeah, you would potentially discourage people from joining that.
Just no standards at all. It might scare people off.
In a primarily like streamer fashion. I don't think very many viewers are going to be discouraged.
No, I mean, no, because it happens all over the board. And I know there are people in like the non-streamer, like regular people or whatever, who have experienced this as well, where when you're on the progressive side of things, you suddenly get held to a higher standard as well. You know?
No.
In a way, like, I'm not saying you're as sneeringly dishonest about it, but in a way, it's kind of like how conservatives will, you know, accuse you of assuming their gender when you're a progressive and you talk to them. Like, they try to hold you to a higher standard because they have a misunderstanding of your beliefs and they try to do it, like, use it to make your life worse or whatever. Stuff like that. Like, with being a socialist, you know? If you really wanted to, you could hit a socialist for hypocrisy for anything. What about conspicuous consumption? That's you know, it's a concept generally aligned with socialists, where they believe that the the public consumption of commodities can be used to further deify, like, you know, capitalist like consumptive standards. So would you be like, oh well, you know, you're a socialist, but I noticed that you drive a nice car. Don't you think you're participating in conspicuous consumption somewhat here? And then, like, it seems like because socialists have so much theory and they talk about so many things, there are so many potential, like, angles you could get one of them on, you know what I mean? For no benefit, like, no good comes from this.
Well,
there are no goods to moral standards. Nothing good comes from having moral standards, guys. Revolutionary philosopher, Vaush video.
How we go about it. I think if you hold those principles, holding people to account on those principles will necessarily, if you believe in them, result in better outcomes. However, right, we may disagree that, like, holding them, what does it look like? What does holding them to those principles look like? And how does that manifest in discouraging people from participating in it and what have you? And I think that's where the real disagreement lies. I think because we hold people to a standard where if they, let's say we agree on $1 million discretionary income. That means $1 million after taxes, after rent, after everything, $1 million income. They should pay their mods a penny, right? Like, I think because we do something like that, like, obviously I'm being a bit hyperbolic, so you have to, you know, bear with me on that. But, like, if we do something like that, I don't think very many people are going to get turned off.
I just don't think that's a socialist thing, like having money, like paying your mods. I think that's something like everyone should agree to, right? If anything,
why does he keep saying like that's not a socialist thing? Everyone should agree to this. No, these are your principles. Not everybody agrees to this. This is why we fight over like just worker compensation all the time. If everybody should agree to this, then why do we have a minimum wage? We don't need one. Everyone should just agree to what the best thing to do is. There's a reason why we have expectations and standards in society.
To be clear, I would apply this to SOCDEMs as well. This argument about paying people like mods and shit like that, and volunteers and stuff like that. Like, for instance, I've had several people who have told me, yeah, I'll make emotes for you for free, and I'm like insisting that, you know, they give me a price point so that way I can pay them, right? Because I think that the labor that they provide, I'm benefiting off of it materially. I ought to provide them, you know, compensation for said labor.
Why not
right?
liberals and conservatives, right? I mean, conservatives advocate for charity more than like any other group.
Yeah, I would agree that I would hold them to a standard where in which, yeah, they should do those
You
things.
are held to a standard as a conservative. If you've ever been to church before, or at least in Catholic churches, they literally pass around, sometimes 2 times during a service, they pass around the little thing where you're supposed to put like $5, $10 or write a check to the church. It is literally an expectation. I believe it's called tithing in I don't know if this is Catholicism or all of Christianity. I'm sure they do this in other churches too. But like you literally pass it around, of course.
Action, knowing that the person who is saying, no, I don't want compensation for being your editor or compensation for being your emo artist or what have you, might be doing that from a position of, holy fuck, this person might find a new emo.
That's a stretch. Churches do it, sure, but nobody is really shamed or forced to. Dude, what do you mean no one is shamed for it? Come on, everybody's looking at you sideways when they're handing those things around. When the ushers come around and they look at it, the church literally mails you out like tons of fucking bullshit, like make sure to donate, blah, 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 blah. If the church is hurting for money, your priest will literally start talking about like, hey guys, like it's a little bit rough right now. You know, we had to get some work done in this and we're trying to buy. All of your donations are appreciated, or all of your they don't say donations. What do they say? Like contributions. They don't say contributions either. What was the word that they use? I think it is contributions. All of your contributions are appreciated or whatever. Like, yeah, of course. There's a whole bunch of like pressure and everything. Yeah. Your offering? Oh, maybe
it's capable of knowing it. Disproportionately speaking, we're going to understand that there is poor people or people who are editors or what have you in incredibly
I understand
fields.
all that. This just seems like kind of the thing that leads to people being really shitty to vegetarians.
Actually, it's so funny because Jesus actually almost gives a sermon on the expectation to donate. When the context for Jesus talking about how it's easier for a poor man, oh God, what is it? It's harder for a rich man to enter heaven than it is for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle. The context for that, I believe, was, I think it was either some Pharisees or some rich people were making fun of some woman who came up and she donated very quietly, like a couple frankincense, I don't know what their currency is called, like a couple of bucks. It was like nothing, right? But there was some guy that went up before her and he made a big flashy show of donating a ton of money to this synagogue or whatever their temple, whatever they were called at the time. He made this big show and this woman went afterwards and Jesus went on to explain, it's like, okay, yeah, the rich guy did it, but he wasn't giving out of the goodness of his heart. He was like making a show out of it. He was being flashy. He was, showboating or whatever. But the woman was genuinely giving like all that she could to the church and like her, this is obviously a really good thing to do. Like even in a religious sense, there are kind of like these commands to tithe, to donate to the church, to give what you can.
Towards making your movement more difficult to like participate in and get up off the ground. You see this all the time with like woke scolding and gatekeeping.
Sorry, it's just funny to say that like religious people wouldn't demand this. It's like it kind of is, but okay.
7 different fucking,
or they should be at least,
ethical understandings of the way in which being white is bad. But when you join the right, you don't have to learn shit. You can just be a dumb fuck and they'll just accept you, And the consequence of that, even though you are encouraging better behavior from people in the left, is that the right is incredibly good at pulling over fuck tons of teenagers who have no understanding of this shit. And then the left is really bad at it. And the left, despite being better in every imaginable way, is fighting an uphill battle because we care about people being perceived hypocrites, and the right doesn't. They just accept people. That makes our movement weaker, and we're not talking about like crocheting clubs here. We're talking about who fights for the future of the world. A weaker left movement is a weaker world, in my opinion. So with all that being said, it seems like this, I don't know, this...
No Destiny, those are separate stories? Wait, are they? Rich man, heaven, eye of needle. Are those 2 separate stories? I thought he told that off the back of the one. Oh God, just give me Bible verses, please. Oh, maybe these might have been 2. I'm sorry. The rich young man comes up to Jesus. My bad. Just then a man comes up to Jesus and inquired, "Teacher, what good thing must I do to obtain eternal life?" "Why do you ask me about what is good?" Jesus replied. "There is only one who is good. If you want to enter life, keep the commandments." "Which ones?" the man asked. Jesus answered, "Do not murder, do not commit adultery, do not steal, do not bear false witness, honor your mother, blah, blah, blah." "All these I have kept," said the young man. "What do I still lack?" Jesus told him, "If you want to be perfect, go, sell your possessions and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come follow me." When the young man heard this, he went away in sorrow because he had great wealth. Then Jesus said to his disciples, "Truly I tell you, it is hard for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. Again, I tell you, it is easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God." When the disciples heard this, they were greatly astonished and asked, "Who then can be saved?" Jesus looked at them and said, "With man, this is impossible. With God, all things are possible." Yeah, give your shit away. What was the other story? Woman donates, rich man donates, Jesus, story, Bible. The widow's offering. Was this? Jesus sat down opposite the place where the offerings were put and watched the crowd putting their money into the temple treasury. Many rich people threw in large amounts, but a poor widow came and put in 2 very small copper coins worth only a few cents. Calling his disciples to him, Jesus said, "Truly I tell you, the poor widow has put more into the treasury than all the others. They all gave out of their wealth, but she, out of her poverty, put in everything, all she had to live on. And then she starved to death and died." There you go. Why are we linking Hasan shit? Can I tell you, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle and for a rich person to enter the kingdom of heaven. Oh, this is in 2018. Good one. Okay, sorry.
These approaches. I don't think that I have to get to the level where I'm arguing against the vegetarian and what have you, in saying that they're a piece of shit. And all that.
I feel like I've outpaced him intellectually. I mean,
well,
if
Is there a difference
if you're
in responsibility
if
between
people
Hasan
don't pay
and
their
the
mods,
televangelist?
but then a
If
person
broadcasting
is
a
like,
message
"Oh,
is
I'm a
sufficient, then
socialist,"
wouldn't I also need to treat Joel Osteen types to that same low standard? I doubt Vaush would let them off the hook so easily.
Yeah, that was the point I made earlier. Okay, I'm pausing these. Hopefully they don't all get fucked up for the rest of the night.
Fact, right?
Not. What do you mean? No, I don't have to make the same arguments as other people that might make that argument.
Well, right, but if what you're saying is by joining up with a political movement, you are opening yourself up to new lines of attack for things you were not previously being attacked for.
Yep.
Isn't that kind of a passive discouragement against, you know?
Vaush is literally arguing against standards for anything. Vaush is arguing against standards for everything. What is this argument? Dude, he's so lost into this.
Dogs here. Or like moreover, against like moving over at all, you know? For instance, I know there are a lot of people who are sympathetic to like anarchist arguments, but like getting into that, I know that things get I know that things get increasingly academic and esoteric, and it becomes like really, really, really difficult to adhere to a lot of the broader political stuff that they advocate for, and it's just so difficult. And the right never has any fucking issue with this, by the way. You can be anti-gay on the right and fuck gay prostitutes out in the weekend, and nobody gives a fuck unless you're found out about it publicly. They do not give
Nobody cares unless they know about it. Yeah, no shit, Sherlock. How can you care about something you don't know about? What?
And like, nobody cares unless it's made public. That's like the only.
Oh, he repeated it for us.
Time people give a fuck, you know. So there's no gatekeeping over there, except on the farthest ends by the craziest people. But over here on the left, like it's like, you know, you become a socialist, and again, like, why not with the conspicuous consumption argument, right? I mean, if a person wore a nice shirt and they were a socialist, couldn't you argue that you know, like they're spending their wealth in a way to demonstrate public consumption, which is sort of lending credence to the capitalist mode of production? You could make that argument if you wanted. I've seen socialists make that argument. It's so exhausting.
I mean, you could make the argument if you wish. My argument would just be that if you're stating a large position that this means of creating whatever, like
oh, allegedly, not apparently. Sorry, allegedly, all that stuff that I said.
I thought you said allegedly.
Okay. Allegedly.
Okay, but you can make shirts or what have you, you can buy shirts from a place that you believe doesn't ethically source those shirts, and that isn't really an issue for me until it comes to the idea where in which you have the means to be able to buy that shirt in an ethical way, if you can. Right? So if you have, let's say the shirt is $5, right, from an unethical source, but you make like $1 million in discretionary income and it costs $20. If you buy it from an ethical source, I would expect you to buy it from the ethical source at that point. I would say you have a moral obligation. Yeah, I would say you have a moral obligation to uphold that. Yeah.
Okay, so again,
Vaush thinks he's gotcha.
Would morally condemn a wealthy socialist for buying a shirt from like a typical big box store. Like if they got a shirt from like Target, you would see that and you would go, you had the option to buy from an ethically sourced.
This is so, but people do this all the time. Fuck, Ahrelevant is getting bullied out of this because Vaush makes it sound so bad. But yeah, people would say like, yeah, you should support small businesses, support local businesses. You actually, unironically, will get condemned based on like who you buy from, depending on like, oh fuck, I'm trying to think of where. Like if you're hosting events and shit, I know this because when it came to the canvassing for hosting events, when you're hosting events and shit, people super push you to like support small businesses. They'll be like, oh, if you're gonna order pizza for this, oh, you should order from this place. Or, like this is like in Omaha, everybody loves people. Oh, you should do this, or oh, you should. And they're always super grateful for it too. I think there's like that culture of like when you're in a community, yeah, especially if you've got money, you should be supporting small businesses. People would say that to support your local communities and shit.
But you said you'd condemn
absolutely ridiculous. I would condemn it if there's an ethical way to do it, and that's reasonable to be able to do.
Well, there always is. In the modern world, you can just buy anything from co-ops. But you're literally saying that if a person, like if you saw a socialist who cared about this stuff, who was wearing a T-shirt that they bought from Walmart or whatever.
And it doesn't have to just be a socialist, but yeah, it'd be anybody.
Oh, wait, hold on. So you would say, you literally just said it depends on how much it's essential to their ideology. Why do you keep saying it's about hypocrisy and then backing off?
He shouldn't.
Wait, hold on.
Ahrelevant shouldn't like. Ahrelevant's so scared about this hypocrisy thing. You should just say like, yeah, it is about being hypocritically, like you're ideologically inconsistent. Yeah.
Buying goods, I guess, from a union.
But then it is a hypocrisy-based argument. Yeah.
So yeah, but it's not about the hypocrisy of socialism.
But why does the hypocrisy matter?
The reason why it matters is
Ahrelevant's
because you
too
have the
scared to just
availability
say
not
like,
to.
yeah.
Wealthy capitalists have the availability not to.
And if they believe that that's a problem, that unethically sourced shirts is a problem,
what if they don't?
ought not buy it.
Does that make it
Then
not
no,
bad?
I don't think that makes it not bad. What I'm talking about is whether or not I can attribute
Vaush
some
is so
level of
lucky, he's so
ignorance
good at
versus
hiding.
malice to it. If they
Fuck.
recognize that it is a bad thing,
I
and
don't
they're like,
think
"Ah,
it's
fuck it,
malicious.
I don't really care.
To buy a t-shirt from Walmart if you're a socialist and could afford to buy it from a co-op online. These are explicitly hypocrisy-based. I don't know why you keep saying like it's not about hypocrisy, but then every time we talk about it, it is indeed
Hold
about
on.
hypocrisy.
It's because the original conversation that we were having was not about hypocrisy. That's not what it was about. The Hasan situation was not about
That
hypocrisy.
is the thing that bothers me. It's when hypocrisy is used as a metric by which people attack socialists but not other groups.
I'm literally telling you that if a conservative or a capitalist had this same argument, that I would attack them as well. I don't know why you're honing in on socialists here. And also, I want it rooted in that, like, the original topic that we were talking about was not about hypocrisy.
Okay.
Okay.
The original topic that we were talking about
Get him, Vaush.
was about what
Take him out.
obligations we have to do good on our platform.
Your finishing
and
move.
Your
Yes.
arguments were specifically influenced by the political beliefs of the hypothetical people that you were describing, which means that hypocrisy was the element. You're talking about hypocrisy every time. Like, every time any justification comes up, it's about hypocrisy.
Do you think that if somebody holds a political belief, me expecting that they should carry out that political belief in reality means that I only care about hypocrisy?
If you think it's more bad to do a thing because the thing that you're doing doesn't align with your broader political views, then yes, that would be by definition an appeal to hypocrisy.
That is on the basis of your ignorance relative to the outcomes of the action. I don't think I can morally condemn somebody on the same level based on the...
Capitalists are aware that when you buy clothing from a big box
it's
shop,
not the
that you do
same.
so in a way that like feeds a broader capitalist system and like gives money to sweatshops and stuff. You're conflating awareness of a thing and moral positions on a thing. What the hypocrisy that you actually care about isn't whether or not you know that X or Y does a bad thing. It's about whether or not you care that X or Y is a bad thing.
Do you think that everybody who supports cops is knowingly participating in supporting the anti-black discrimination that is systemic amongst the police force?
No, but a lot of them.
Hold on. Okay. So I would make an appeal to those. So I mean, I would doubt that, like, that on the face of it, but even if let's agree on it nonetheless, right? If we agree on that, then I would be making an argument to those people that are ignorant of of that system. The people that are aware of that system, that's some chaotic evil shit, if you're aware of it. I think what's far more common is that
only changes their level of awareness, not necessarily the moral harm of the action or the potential outcomes of how you would address it.
Dude, we're not talking about outcomes and oh god, he's like utilitarian brained all up like it's utilitarianism all the way down.
Depending on whether or not somebody's ignorant or somebody's doing it in malice.
Why? Huh? What outcome are you trying to achieve by handling it differently?
The changing of an action, whether or not somebody's doing something of malice or of ignorance. If they're doing it of ignorance, I could educate them and they have a fair chance.
Why are malice and ignorance the only possible options here? Do you think that animals have feelings?
Yeah.
Okay, do you eat meat?
Yes.
Okay, is that malicious? When you buy the meat, are you thinking, you know, like, hey, fuck these chickens? Or instead, is it just a little evil to which you have become acclimated? Something that you don't think about all the time, something which has become systematized, normalized. This is how it is with big box stores too, after all, right? I have bought from Target. I was a socialist before I was wealthy, and I still have been known to buy from Target. I don't go there thinking like, ah, yes, this mattress spread. I hope the Chinese slaves who made it have arthritis, you know? Like, the malice implies, and because we're circling back around to Hasan here, I think, that when Hasan, like, doesn't do a charity stream, he's doing it maliciously. Like he's like cackling when he does it. As opposed to the real answer, and I think this is much more descriptive, by the way, which is that he's a dumbass, and that he does whatever he wants. And that our goal should just be to guide him doing whatever he wants towards the most, like, ethically beneficial outcomes, right? Like, we should guide him. But the idea that he's going to be more responsive, or that anyone in the socialist community is more responsive to, like, it's Hasan, hypocrite, not pay mods more money, he bad.
So,
like,
hold on.
I just don't think it's affecting
I'm just wondering, like, how could I levy criticism then? If I cannot morally condemn an action, how could I criticize him?
I do. I've said, I think that Hasan, I literally called him, I've called him an idiot like 3 times in this convo.
Well,
I've said that he's lazy. I've said that he...
There's nothing wrong with what he's doing. So
yeah, there's nothing wrong with it.
Sure, but he could always do better. It's true.
Why would you be an idiot for not doing something that you could do, but that's not required of you to do?
Always push him to do better.
What?
But there's a difference between
but
how
there's
I
no,
do
there's
that.
no obligation for him to do better. So
why is he an idiot?
Why would he ever do better?
Yes.
You don't have the ability to enforce an obligation on him anyway.
Morally, we do. We hold each other to moral standards all the time.
An obligation onto him. That's not what I'm trying to do.
When you say obligation in a practical term, obligations have to have like the ability to be enacted. There must be consequences.
No, that's not true at all. Morality doesn't, when we're having conversation about morality, it's not that these things are only bad insofar as there's like a consequence to the action. Maybe like in a legal sense or whatever, but like, I mean like cheating on your partner is bad, but there's not really like a legal consequence for it. So does that mean it's not bad in Vaush's world? Or like if I go online and I call somebody like a bunch of slurs, I'm like, maybe I'll get banned, but there's not like a legal consequence for it. Or like I could do it on the street and there's no consequence for it, right?
Against him though. And like in what way we can go about it, in what manner we can go about it.
Well, you cannot deny that in lieu of the environment we're in right now, which is this huge wave of right-wing media attacks against Hasan for being a hypocrite, that I might think there's a better way of handling this, right?
Yeah, you could think that there's a better way of handling it, and I could as well, because I'm not using the same arguments the right-wingers are. I wouldn't say because there's a bunch of people making shitty criticisms of a person, that means that I shouldn't criticize them because, well, other people are making shitty criticisms.
I mean, you're still making the hypocrisy argument, right?
I would make, not relative to the same way that all of these conservatives are. No, these conservatives are making the, well, no, because you're reducing it down to that. You're saying you're making the hypocrisy. No, not in this, in nearly a comparable fashion to any conservative. All of these conservatives are saying he's hypocritical because he's a socialist that makes money. There is nothing hypocritical about being a socialist who makes money. Nothing at all.
You've said there's something, okay, do you think there's something hypocritical about a socialist who makes money who doesn't use that money to further their political platform?
No.
No, Ahrelevant is getting walked
Then I
into...
guess I'm a little bit confused because I was under the impression...
This is, no, it's because I haven't been arguing about hypocrisy this whole time.
But then you have been, though.
No, I've been arguing that we ought to hold people to higher moral standards. That's what I'm saying.
So then can you understand my frustration when you're making the argument that this is something we should be ubiquitously doing, except I've never seen you talk about it except before Hasan. Your last 3 videos are on Hasan, and nobody's talking about it in the context of anyone anywhere except for Hasan, and it's always Hasan, and this is the 13th conversation I've had about Hasan. Like, well, I swear, I defend this guy more than his mom must. Like, and I don't even fucking watch his shit. Like, in the context of all that, you cannot deny that you are contributing to this overwhelming slant. And even if your arguments are more nuanced, and I won't deny they are. I mean, you're up against the, you know, the mental fortitude of Ben Shapiro here, so I certainly fucking hope so. But even in the context of all of that, it's still, from an outside perspective, at least to me, it still just seems like, yeah, socialists should be held to higher standards than non-socialists because they think that being bad with money is more bad than capitalists think being bad.
Oh, I'm not talking Ahrelevant. I'm sorry. I'm not going to. I'm trying to debate by proxy.
You can build good arguments around that, but that's the core. Holy shit! That's the giant thresher. Okay, hold on. Sorry, I didn't mean to shout like that. That was very bad.
That's fine. Like, it just has to do with like your political philosophy and what you believe, what I can consider to be reasonable relative to it. I will hold you to a specific standard. I think that that's fine. However, that specific standard there should be like basic human standards, but also there's like educational standards that I expect like a socialist to meet in comparison to like other people. So like,
then
for
that
instance,
is the stop saying it's not a hypocrisy argument, but then say that is a hypocrisy argument.
Am I talking to him afterwards?
Keep running
Oh, if he wants to, yeah,
so
sure.
Can you explain this to me? Then how is it a hypocrisy argument for me to expect a socialist to know about, let's say, welfare, disproportionately speaking, relative to a conservative.
Anybody who talks politics at all should be aware of like welfare, right? I mean, that should be like a ubiquitous
Well,
thing.
they should be, but that's not the reality. However, I don't think it is obtuse for me to expect that a socialist knows more about welfare than a conservative.
Well, this is the thing you keep doing, though. You say that a socialist should know more about something, but you're not actually talking about what socialists know about. You're not talking about what knowledge they have.
When he says know about, he means they should obviously behave in accordance with that knowledge. Come on, Vaush.
Because you keep doing this. It's like, well, a socialist should know more about X. Why? Why should a socialist know more about X? Why should a basic belief that society should be controlled by the workers mean that you're familiar with esoteric government policy that barely anyone
esoteric government policy
really understands how they work in this country? What you're saying is...
Do you want me to answer that?
What you're saying isn't that socialists know more about it as a group. What you're saying is that socialists have different feelings about it. It's not a knowledge gap, it's a moral difference. And you're saying they're betraying that moral difference. That is a hypocrisy argument.
Okay, so can I respond to the original claim? So the reason why I would attribute that like socialists may know more about X, Y, and Z is because it is closer towards or encompassed by the tenets of what I would consider to be somebody who labels themselves as socialist. So if somebody identifies as a socialist, they're probably going to know about the means of production. Do we agree or disagree about that? Like we probably, that's probably the case, right?
I mean,
and
if a person's a capitalist, they probably know about like welfare. I mean, don't you just know about welfare if you're poor in this country? I mean, you would know about it just tangentially if you grow up in any family that had to benefit from it.
My God.
Sure. But my whole the part of this that I feel like is getting lost is that a socialist, right, doesn't get just, typically speaking, naturally just occur inside of our society. You have to undergo some kind of political education, some political reformation. I mean, it seems like right now there's a pretty big tendency for you to come out as a capitalist.
Okay, let me just...
Do you disagree?
We can cut to the heart of this.
Okay.
Do you think that it is equally bad for a socialist and a capitalist streamer who both know about the working conditions of poor people to not pay their mods?
Yeah, it depends.
Because if it depends means this is a hypocrisy argument. Because you keep saying it's a knowledge gap, but if they have the same level of knowledge on it, then it's not a knowledge gap, it's their value system.
Well, no, you said the same level of knowledge about like worker exploitation.
Their same level of knowledge about everything related to the issue. They just disagree on it morally.
Oh, everything related to the issue? Then no.
Right,
I would not. Or then I would attribute the same thing. I thought you just said worker exploitation. There's more facets than just worker exploitation than that.
So if a socialist and a capitalist like YouTuber knew the exact same amount about everything, they just had different moral positions. You would say they're both equally acting it out of malice if they don't pay their mods or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you think it's a little bit unfair that you automatically assign a greater degree of knowledge to socialists then? If it's the
by definition they're socialists.
Paying your mods, I don't really know if that has anything to do, like an understanding that paying your mods is good. Like by that metric, you could say that socialists instantly, by innate knowledge, have more knowledge on everything relating to do with poverty and the economy, because socialism is an economic system and they tend to...
Yeah, kind of like how a religious person would have more knowledge about how to pray than an atheist.
I think it tends to be that conservatives are going to have a greater understanding of how the stock market works than socialists.
I guess it just seems like if we're really reducing this to a knowledge gap, you found a way of like putting the hypocrisy argument one further. Like, it's not the hypocrisy argument. It's just I assume socialists will know more about all the things that I will morally.
Well, I don't think it's wild to assume, to not only assume but also like have evidence for like the knowledge of these specific things. So like this, I use this in reference to.
I just think everyone
what I
knows
said.
it.
Come on, I'm using this like, for instance, in reference to Hasan and the editor situation, where he's saying that like he gave his editor the means of his production by giving him the
I'm not denying
computer.
Denying that was stupid as shit.
And the reason why I could condemn, in my opinion, him more for that than somebody else is because he has a level of knowledge about it. He has a level of knowledge about giving people the means of his production and what the means of the production mean in regards to liberating the workers. And I would argue that is not just something that people are born innately with, that they just have any knowledge or what have you over it. I condemn him more because he claimed to be somebody and prescribes or states that he is somebody that has a measure of knowledge on it and clearly didn't.
Yeah, well, I agree that it's okay to condemn him for that thing that he said, but I'm just talking about stuff regarding, like, whether or not you should be, like, donating money to causes or whatever.
But
you know?
I think the reason why I want to talk about the computer thing is because that stems from, in my opinion, his knowledge of the situation. If he was somebody that didn't know anything about the means of production, I let that shit slide.
No, I agree that, but
really
you assume a greater degree of knowledge, and I think that you assume way too little knowledge from, like, non-socialists. Like, you really don't fucking think that, like, liberals and capitalists and conservatives don't know, like, that they're mistreating their workers when they do X or Y?
No, this is so dumb.
They don't have, like,
I need them to be done. I need to talk to Ahrelevant. We need to do a debrief.
So I can cite Ethan Klein, literally, and Hasan having a debate on this on their podcast, where Ethan was like, no, I think it's a fair wage to not give your editor rev share. And they had a disagreement about that. Like, Ethan believed that you didn't have to give your editor like 50% rev share for it to be a fair and equal wage. Like, there is a massive amount of difference between these things. Like, what one person considers to be a fair wage and exploitation versus another person considering it to be a fair wage and exploitation is radically different between these people.
But that's a moral difference, not a knowledge one.
Well, no. Okay, so
they both know. They're both equally aware.
They're both equally aware of what?
They're both equally aware of all the relevant conditions. They just have a different moral understanding of what is an acceptable amount to pay a worker.
And what is that informed by?
Your knowledge of the situation is not informed by your moral perspective in the way you're describing. Because if it was, then this would become a hypocrisy argument again. If you're saying that the knowledge surrounding fair treatment of workers is gatekept, or at least heavily coded behind the socialist moral framework, then that would, again, mean that your standards for condemnation would rest heavily on the ideological leanings of the person making these arguments. And that would be, if they're socialists, they're held to a higher standard. There's no way of moving past this. Look, okay, I'm sorry. We've been running in circles for a long time, and this is infuriating, considering the fact that allegedly we agree on what we should be doing here. Basically, you just think that we should be like condemning, and I think we should be encouraging. The fact that we managed to draw 2 hours of blood from that stone is insane. Can I just
condemning and encouraging?
I mean,
like these can be two sides of the same coin.
Can I see like anyone getting dogged on this anywhere apart from socialists, because it's so fucking disproportionate, you know? So I believe you when you say you would hold other people to this standard, but there is a broader pattern that many people have fed into of, yeah, we're totally super sincerely concerned with fair worker treatment. Just ignore that we're only attacking the 1% of the American population represented on social media that's like a socialist or whatever, you know? I would just like to see, like, I want to see people getting hit for this all over the place. If we're really being consistent, that's what I want to see, you know?
I would say a really good example of this is when every single person on the left shits on, like, corporations that change their logo to, like, for Pride Month, and then change it back the moment Pride Month is done. Do you not agree?
What about it?
Well, it's the same exact, like,
I love the obtuseness.
Somebody going through, committing to something in a performative nature, or whatever you consider to be congruent with this specific example, right? Like Hasan specifically stating that, or again, I don't really like targeting him specifically, but unfortunately, it's going to be rooted in it. Hasan specifically not participating in specific activity, or I mean wanting to be able to morally condemn him for specific activities, right? And what have you. And my criticism being able to be levied at other people for doing the same thing, not actually advocating for proper, whatever, political advocacy. And the way that people advocate for, like, political causes is by just changing their logo once a month, and then me going, yeah, listen, that ain't it. You're gonna need to do a little bit more, right? You're gonna need to do a little bit more than just changing your logo once every year for 1 month every year, you're gonna need to do a little bit more. Wouldn't you count that as probably an example?
Do you think it's a bad thing for a company to do like a pro BLM like?
No.
Okay.
Construction complete.
Okay. Do you think they could do better?
Yes.
Okay. I agree completely. And that's been my position on rainbow capitalism for a long time, too. I don't think it's bad to do rainbow capitalism.
You can still do bad and good things simultaneously, though, right? Like, I think that's the thing. Like, if you... Like, for instance, let's say I owe a friend $100 and I pay him $50. Was that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, I mean, it's good I gave him $50, but it's bad that I didn't pay him back the full $100, right? Like, there's a...
I guess if it seemed like they were doing it, like, deliberately, I don't mean, like, if they didn't change their social media profile pic for a year or something, but if they released some statement saying they would no longer be doing it, I guess
if they just if they just stop doing it forever.
It'd be a little odd. I'd have to wonder why. I mean, I don't know if it does, like, that much good for the LGBTQ community for them to actually do it, but it would, a decision to not do it would be an odd omission.
Okay, no, I'm just, would you condemn them for not doing it anymore?
Condemn? Probably no. I probably wouldn't even think about it.
Okay.
Unless I felt like there was some direct, like, motivation, you know, like some, like there was, it was being done in alignment with some rejection of or movement away from the queer community.
Okay, so then let me ask you this: what if Hasan stopped talking about politics and just went full gaming?
I guess I'd be okay with that.
Okay. You wouldn't have any issues with that?
Wait,
whatsoever?
Did he say go full gaming and no politics, or did he say go full? He said full gaming and no politics, right?
We shouldn't be encouraging this kind of behavior.
I don't even know what Vaush believes. I don't know what the fuck Vaush even believes in. I have no idea.
Regular frat bro, react Andy bullshit, you know?
I don't know.
He gets about the same amount, which makes me think that, like, in a way, it could actually participate to diversity of tactics, right?
Sorry,
like
no. What I mean by stop doing political content is he stops talking about socialism altogether.
Like never ever. Like never.
He becomes XQC. He becomes XQC.
I guess if he just became XQC, I would think that was bad, because there's some wasted potential going on there.
Right, and so wait, you would morally condemn? You would say that's bad?
Well, I would say it would be bad for him to move away, like he was doing.
Saying something is bad is moral condemnation. That's what bad means.
No longer doing a very good thing. That's bad.
And right, and so that's what I'm trying to describe when I'm talking about, like, setting a higher moral standard. Is I'm trying to move that bar that you have set up. That's what I'm trying to talk about, right? I think we can push the envelope. I think we can push people to do more.
Yeah, I guess it really depends on, like, how you handle it too, you know? Like, for instance, if Hasan did that, if he stopped being talked about socialism or whatever, if he moved away from that, and then, like, people are responding by, like, no, dude, haha, fucking social lying, whatever, like some bullshit like that.
Sure.
I would think that was pretty bad if I felt like it was all this really weird, spiteful bullshit. But if there were people, like, encouraging him to do better or encouraging him to move back to it, then I'd be in favor of that, you know?
You know?
So I guess then maybe we just, perhaps it's just a language difference here. We're just throwing up semantics, because I would say that you referencing, like, a retreat from standard or status quo for some of these things, like whether it be rainbow capitalism or, let's say, Hasan propagating socialism, in your moral, like, saying that's bad, however you describe that, is probably the same way that I'm describing that we ought to consider the standard bad. We just ought to make the status quo a thing of the past. And
yeah, but I would still never respond to it the way that, like, you and a lot of other people do.
Shit.
Where, like, it's hypocrisy based. If you're a socialist, you should put more effort into, like, making your arguments, you know.
I'd never do that.
Shit like
That's
that.
Absurd.
I would never ever
beneath me.
Arguments.
Hey, do you think that I'm making it a hypocrisy based argument as my, like, primary argument? Like, because you're constantly stating that I'm making a hypocrisy-based argument.
Yes, I do think that. I have to think that, yeah.
All right.
Because it seems like whenever we run down to it, it's like either there's a way in which socialists are more accountable than non-socialists, or moving back from that, there's a way in which socialists know things which make them more accountable than non-socialists who you expect not to know things.
Can you explain to me then why it is bad?
Dude, there's so many ways. Like, this knowledge, sometimes the knowledge of doing something wrong can in fact make something wrong, right? Like, let's say, for instance, let's say that you're a company and you've just got some extra waste and you just dump it outside and you don't care. You just dump it because it's gone the next day. You never even see it, right? And you don't know any better, right? Is that the same level of wrongness as now you learn when you dump that waste, it seeps into the ground and it destroys like groundwater tables or whatever, right? Is it the same level of wrong? Well, now it's worse because knowledge that you're committing a wrong makes it wrong. If you don't know, it's hard to argue from that standpoint. Now you can go into like tangential wrongs, right? Like, do you have an obligation to collect a certain amount of information? Do you have an obligation to like vet your actions, right? We can get into those types of wrongs, but yeah, being granted specific knowledge about an action you're doing that further illustrates the wrongness of that action is absolutely like grounds to say that it's become wrong, of course. But this is like, there's like a million different things that we can argue about, like where everybody would obviously agree with this. Everybody would agree with this. Like everybody knows this, right? Like this is almost intuitively true, as much as I hate to use that expression. Like you almost intuitively know this.
That if Hasan ever did leave the movement, it would probably be because people kept complaining about his house. So at least I'm not contributing to whatever trend led him to drop the whole thing, right?
I mean, sure, but at that point, I mean, if what you're stating is that it is bad that he is going about his business and choosing to no longer participate in politics and what have you, what is the substantial difference that you're finding between that statement and my statement?
The discourse that it contributes to.
God damn, you got him, dude. The optics.
How? Like, in what way?
Because nobody has ever grouped my comments on Hasan ever with a right-wing attack against socialism, and people have you with it.
Why is that an argument? I don't understand why he thinks that's an argument.
I'm engaging in broader discourse is more responsible and facilitates.
Ben Shapiro said a sentence that was similar to one of your sentences. Therefore,
my
you
argument
lose.
To somebody else doesn't mean that my argument is less valid. Just because you're attributing.
I'm not saying. Well, I think your argument is invalid because it relies on like hypocrisy as like the driving point. But with that aside, it's not about the validity of the argument. It's about the effect of the argument, the harm being done potentially by that argument. And I think the way I'm handling it is the most responsible way for the left to handle it. Right? I mean, nobody's out here. Nobody out here gonna accuse me of, you know, perpetuating the idea that socialists should be held to a higher standard than any other political group, because I think that's bullshit. You know, I think that shit keeps people out of socialist movements. You could do that for anything. I mean, you did that. You said that you could condemn a socialist for buying a shirt from Target. I mean, I like that shit like that. It's like one of the reasons.
It's not specifically a socialist. It has to do with the. It's what do you mean? It's not specifically a socialist. It's if you believe in this idea, I feel like you should try your best to live by that principle.
That's literally a hypocrisy argument.
Okay. In that regard, sure.
Yeah,
sure.
No,
what's wrong with that?
I've been explaining what's wrong with that. You keep saying it's not a hypocrisy argument.
No, Vaush, that specific thing, sure, but you're trying to make the argument that all of my criticism of Hasan are baked into hypocrisy. It's not.
No, it's not
what it's
all
baked
of your,
into.
No, it's not all of your criticisms, which is why you've criticized him a few times, and I've said, yeah, he's a dumbass. I'm not relegating all your criticisms. I'm saying that hypocrisy is pretty central to one of the criticisms that you're making here, and it's the one that I take most issue with, because for centuries, anything regarding the idea that socialists should be held to a higher standard based on what they believe, because that is the default anti-socialist argument that people have been making for ages. Always and always and always, it goes like this. Rather than talking about actual socialist positions, they back up 40 steps and they say, well, I don't know. I just think that if you were really a socialist, then you wouldn't own this factory, Engels, you know? But of course, that factory was the only reason that Marx was able to finance the publication of the books that ended up leading multiple global communist revolutions. So, in a utilitarian sense, who am I supposed to believe here? The capitalists sneeringly avoiding an argument, or the socialists who became the bedrock of centuries-long ideological
If you think I'm avoiding an argument, just say it with your chest. Which argument you think I'm avoiding?
No, the broader capitalist, non-socialist community often uses hypocrisy as a way of avoiding arguments against socialists.
But you're talking to me, Vaush.
Yes,
if you feel like I'm
giving them the ammo with the hypocrisy argument that they use to avoid the real questions.
Vaush, actually argue with my argument. Don't
I am
say that
arguing
I'm
with
fueling... You're saying my argument sounds like an argument that other people use, so therefore I'm giving fuel to their argument.
No, I'm saying your argument is what they use, and they use it to avoid dealing with the arguments that socialists put forward. The argument you're making is that argument. It's directly that argument.
If it is that argument,
is the driving, that's the socialists should be held to higher standards.
Flak batteries should be able to kill. Point defense will shoot small ships, corvettes, right?
Step. Well, actually, no, you are, because the next step is to laugh at socialists rather than address their positions directly. And we watched a video of you laughing at Hasan for saying something that's not even inaccurate.
If you have an issue and you think that I'm running away from socialist positions, exactly what I said 45 seconds ago.
Not corvettes, strike
then
press. So this won't shoot
I'm trying to avoid?
corvettes? It won't?
Man,
what positions? You just said I'm running away from attacking socialist positions. Which position am I running away from attacking?
Man, I just said this.
Okay,
I'm not saying you're running from it. I'm saying you're using the argument people use to run away from them.
Fuck it.
People use the anti-hypocrisy argument for socialists all the time. That's like the favorite one. That's why the
and conservatives use the lib argument against soc dems, and so do socialists. Can I make the argument socialists are the same as conservatives?
How do they make that argument? What lib?
Right,
wait, no, stop. So I gave a specific example. The idea that socialists should be held to a higher standard, than people in other political groups. You said the lib argument. What does that refer to? What argument?
That refers to liberals
The
being incredibly...
The Führer? Is that what he said?
Ostentatious.
Lib spotted.
Like that, because I think there's misuse of that. Liberals being incredibly fragile and weak around specific topics and regarding to capitalism, their retreat to big tech, or their retreat to coupling up to big business and what have you to protect themselves from.
Are liberals not by definition pro big business?
And the conservatives make the exact same argument. That'd be my point.
The difference is that's a true thing. That's a descriptive fact of the world we live in, whereas you're making a moral argument.
Wait, what is the argument that I'm making that is not descriptive?
The idea that socialists should be held to higher moral standards than other groups.
Okay,
that's a moral argument.
Specifically, right? You are held to different moral standards because you have different moral standards. I don't feel like this is
I'm not a
weird.
moral relativist. I don't think that the standards by which I should be held to are affected by the things I believe.
What does that mean, Vaush? Oh, God. Where's Joanne at? Listen, I can't be this painful when I talk about philosophy, am I?
As it facilitates our ability to meaningfully achieve our goals.
Oh my God.
In a pragmatic sense. But you don't believe what you're saying right now. Do you think that rape is okay if pro-rape people are doing it? Of course not.
No, I would never say that something is okay because of ignorance, but I would say that my moral condemnation...
It's not ignorance. They know that rape is harmful to women. They just don't care. So should they be held to different standards?
No.
Oh my God.
I agree.
Hold on.
So people's moral positions on something, their moral beliefs, I don't think it should influence their the standards we hold them to, not directly. Maybe the positions they're in, the positions of power.
I'm talking about the moral condemnation versus something like perhaps we could talk about punishment or what have you. I think often there needs to be, but not always, punishment that is befitting the more or less, for lack of a better term, befitting the crime, right? The outcome of what happened, right? But also that needs to be coupled in is the information that an individual has. I'm making arguments about information.
But then you're assuming socialists always have the information, so it's not really about...
I don't think... So when I'm talking about Hasan, this is why I say I don't think this works perfectly for Hasan. I have thousands of hours of footage to be able to back up that argument that he has made claims. This is why I talked about the editor and the computer example. I don't think you can retreat from that position. Sorry, not you. Hasan could retreat from the position that, he was ignorant of the way the means of production works or what have you, in regards to his display or his...
how much Marxist theory Hasan has actually read, because I feel like
I think it's very little. Yeah.
He might give me a run for my money when it comes to a principled understanding of some of this stuff, how little he's read on it,
Sure. And so, in my opinion, right, that if somebody is talking about how much they've read on something or what have you, why should I not be able to hold that person to a different moral standard? Maybe we're getting caught up on higher, a different moral standard than somebody else. Why can I not do that?
You could hold them to account for spreading misinformation. Because what that would be a position and a condemnation relative not to their moral values, but rather to their station. That you are a big socialist streamer. That means people will come to you for information about socialism. And because of that station, you're doing a unique level of harm when you spread misinformation like that. See, in that case, that's not an argument from hypocrisy, because the fundamental issue there isn't what they believe, it's what they do to the world as a product of their station. I think that's a perfectly salient argument, and it's one that I've made towards him several times. And people have made towards me, huh? Yeah, they're like, Vaush don't read no theory either.
I think that perhaps just there's a lot of this conversation that is just...
is that not good? Does that not work?
No, I mean it could work. I have my disagreement. I think we've kind of looped a bit on some of our positions. I just think it mainly comes down to an idea that me and you have the primary disagreement is on whether or not moral condemnation or what have you, and the use of moral condemnation when it comes to society and how we use it. I think you have a view of me when I say moral condemnation that I'm screaming from the high hills saying that they're a piece of shit, which I can't really blame you too much for. I've had some very fervorous disagreements about Hasan's behavior, what have you, and if you want to sift through that or look through the evidence of that and then say that that's what my position is, then so be it, or what have you. But I think that what really illustrated the difference for me is that you agree that it would be bad if Hasan stopped doing what he's doing.
Well, it would be him no longer doing a good thing, but we have to delineate a difference between doing a bad thing and no longer doing a good thing. If you had a world-renowned doctor who traveled the world and they saved a bunch of people's lives, but they were 68 and they were yeah, I'm going to retire now. I'm getting tired. I'm getting old. What they're essentially doing is making a decision to prioritize their comfort over the lives of the people they might save in the future, right? But we would still allow for that. I wouldn't say it's a bad thing. I would say they're no longer doing a good thing. Colloquially, it's bad that they're no longer doing a good thing, but that's not the same thing as doing a bad thing in and of itself, right? I mean,
sure. I just don't see why we wouldn't hold people to higher standards when we feel like we can. Why not push for people to do more? Why not push
not based on their ideology? You can hold him to a higher standard because of his wealth, because of the fact that he's a large political pundit, because he has a large voice, but not the ideology, because that's the argument that people make.
Vaush, do you want to hold conservatives to a higher standard and say that conservatives should go out there and canvass? Do you want to do that? Because I don't want to do that. I don't want to hold conservatives to a higher standard, because if I do, they're going to start winning more elections than they do.
Well, wait, if we're making an argument from pragmatism, then I think that you shouldn't hold people within the socialist movement to a higher standard in a way that foments destruction of the movement. And I think that this does.
We would just disagree on whether or not it ferments or it brings about the destruction of the movement.
I mean, so far I've just seen a lot of bad, nonsense come about from this discourse, and absolutely nothing worthwhile. Nothing. Nobody's mind is being changed at all. And the thing is, I'm harder on most other people on the left. I do think that his dumb frat boyish tendencies get in the way of him delivering good political positions. And I do think that he has a lot of lazy affects that he adopts, because to go farther than that would involve I respect him for arguing with his chat a lot, because arguing with your chat makes you a good streamer no matter what. But there are definitely things he does that I think are worthy of criticism. I would just never say it's socialists should be held to a higher standard. I just don't think that, because that's your belief system. I don't think
if we want socialists to win, why wouldn't we hold them to higher standards?
If we want them to win, we should do things that help the movement. Holding people to higher standards can hurt the movement, how veganism has been hurt by gatekeepers.
How are we going to actually how are we going to push that people, for instance, canvas without making arguments that people?
Do you think veganism has been helped by the hyper militant vegans who accuse everyone of being super morally repugnant for participating in the meat eating industry?
So this is what I was talking about earlier when I was saying I think when what you hear when I say morally condemn is something that I'm not saying. I'm not saying that we have to call him a piece of garbage, a walking piece of shit, because he does what he does. I'm using moral condemnation as a vehicle to be able to establish a moral standard. That's what I'm doing. So the standard that you have set that you say would be bad if he went below that moral standard, I'm just arguing for you to make it a little bit like have it go a little bit higher.
It's just it's just about the
All right, I'm back. What I
behavior that
missed?
prevents the best results. If I thought that you could get really, really good like advocacy for socialism by holding this gatekeeping standard to people, then I would advocate for it.
What is the point?
Yeah,
Okay, I'm typing the first. This is the first thing I'm typing to Ahrelevant.
Being a socialist, I'm not saying he isn't a socialist.
Ask him. What is
you're gatekeeping people from socialism?
the point
saying that they
of
have a higher
making
set
more
of moral standards
socialists
to adhere to.
if
Do you
there is
agree
no
that
different
but I
standard
feel like
for
this is getting
behavior?
Pretty ridiculous. Do you agree that I'm also gatekeeping people by saying that like we shouldn't say the N-word?
What does that have to do with what we're talking about?
It's a moral
Well,
standard.
you just said like, hey, if we hold people to a higher moral standard, then we're gonna have less people in the movement. And by me saying, hey guys,
no, hold on.
Yeah?
That has nothing to do with what I was saying. Not whether or not we hold people to a higher standard. It's whether or not you think that you're more willing to condemn a person if they join the movement that you want them to be a part of. Like, are you like, like for instance, veganism, and I think this is a perfectly salient example. Online.
The salience of the example ameliorates all of our problems.
By the gatekeeping like piece of shit like moral Puritans who make it insufferable. Like, because to them, going vegan for once every like 1 day out of every week is it's like it's not enough. If anything, it's an insult, you know? Because in order to do that, you have to kind of get in with vegan communities, you know? Like, nobody started getting into veganism without being at least tangentially close to vegan communities, but they'll hate you for it. Because they don't, because they just see you as like a, you know, like, oh, well, now that you're aware of this stuff, you know, now that you're at least partially in it, and you're still like eating meat 6 days out of the week, like, no. But it leads to like really bad outcomes in advocacy. The most successful advocates for veganism.
Most vegans, by the way, would be super chill with you changing one meal or two meals. Like most vegans are pretty chill with like you taking small steps.
Bad action if you do X or Y.
But okay, dude.
Even if you believe they are, what you do instead is you try to help people into the good positions. You know, hey, eating vegan isn't as bad as you think it is. You know, we can do better on this. You know, here are some really great recipes. Actually, did you know that eating vegan is cheaper than da-da-da-da-da? If you took that attitude towards Hasan doing advocacy, then fuck yes. Hey, Hasan, did you know that being a super duper rich fucking millionaire means that you have lots of money you can give to causes? Oh boy. Hey, did you know you don't have to sit there watching YouTube videos for 12 hours? You can actually like do something.
Okay, can I respond?
Yeah, but like that's a it's a good.
Okay, so I'm just stumped as to why. I mean, it comes down to me personally for why would we care about furthering a political cause or getting people politically activated if they have no moral obligation to do anything? Like, what is the point of making getting more people involved if there's no moral standard for them to do anything?
Because if they get involved, they do more good things than they were doing before.
So you just hope that people
so
do things.
stupid.
No,
Is that what you do?
Encourage them to do good things.
But why would you encourage? Who cares you encourage somebody if there's no moral standards?
I don't know how you think social movements work, but yes, encouraging people to do good things is generally how all political I mean, you could go the fascist route. You could scare them if you want. I mean, I guess there are other options if you want. We could lie about like illegals that are.
Remember Mao's encouragement or Stalin's encouragement?
What? Yes, obviously, encouraging people is what you do. And
why would he say this? I don't have you know how all social movements work. Yeah, they work at the end of a rifle, bro.
Between criticism and condemnation. There's a difference between tone, attitude,
not all of them, to be fair.
And there's certainly a pretty...
Wait, so I think this is just a difference of language then.
But we've talked about this.
No, I literally made a point earlier about how criticism, I believe that you need to have some basis of moral condemnation.
Do you think there's a difference between saying Hasan should donate some more money and he could afford to, and saying Hasan is bad for not donating? Do you think there's a difference between those two things?
Yeah, there is.
Okay. Do you think it's possible that the former might be a more like effective?
Yeah, for sure, but both can be moral condemnation.
Okay, if the former is moral condemnation, then that's the kind of moral condemnation that I'm in favor of, and the latter is the kind of moral condemnation that I'm not in favor of. And none of it has anything to do with him being a socialist.
Okay, that's...
If you acknowledge there was a difference between those two things, so I don't know why you're pretending that there's
a difference in the strategy that you approach it in, of course.
Yeah,
but they're both moral condemnation.
Both can be moral condemnation.
Yes. Thank you for saying that. Thank God.
I have said from the beginning of this conversation what type of language I think it's okay to engage in. So what I just said, I think that's fine. And I think that some of the stuff that I see levied against Hasan is less fine. Because it's dumb and it feels to me like it's a reflection of old arguments that people use.
Well, and I haven't disagreed with that. When have I agreed that like Ben Shapiro's arguments were good?
Well, you said things that were similar to him.
Said that Ben Shapiro's arguments were good. You did say that Ben Shapiro's appeal to hypocrisy was valid, though, because you believe that is an acceptable way of adjusting the means by which you might condemn a person for the things they do.
That that's a crazy stretch. No, I don't think his points are valid. Just because he's coming at it.
Please, you have to listen to what I'm saying. I didn't say you said his points were valid. I said your fundamental belief that hypocrisy or arguments from hypocrisy is valid was the foundational premise of Ben Shapiro's argument, as has always been the case against socialists. I'm not saying you agree with or said everything that he said. I'm not even saying that you said most of his points, but that was the fundamental argument, and it is one that you have reaffirmed over the past 2 hours and 40 minutes in this conversation that you believe in. Whether you move it backwards and gatekeep it behind like the level of knowledge you expect people to have.
Do you agree then that you're hiding behind hypocrisy when you make the argument that it would be bad for Hasan to not participate in the action that he is, like if he went to an XQC type?
No, that has nothing to do with hypocrisy, and the fact that you would equate those things makes me worried that we are not on the same page. That's
not on the same page. Say not on the same level.
I think we haven't been on the same page for a while. I've been trying to get us back onto the same page for quite a bit of time. Like, I feel like you're constantly making appeals to like Ben Shapiro and things like this where it just doesn't fit. Obviously you would disagree with that, but.
Well, I think the only thing that I've said about Ben Shapiro in relation to this conversation is that he also uses hypocrisy as a vehicle for making attacks on socialists that he wouldn't make against non-socialists, which I think is dumb.
I'm sure Ben Shapiro attacks other Republicans all the time. He attacked Trump quite a bit, didn't he? Didn't Shapiro hit on Trump quite a bit? I thought he got in trouble for that with like other Republicans.
Too, right?
Yeah, and it is bad when he does.
I shouldn't say hit on, but
I think that generally speaking.
So when you said, I just wanted to be clear because you said a second ago when he only makes hypocrisy arguments, or at least it sounded like you said he only makes.
I don't think I said he only makes them against socialists. I do think socialists are the victims of hypocrisy arguments often. I do think, by the way, that there is a place for hypocrisy arguments at times. Usually, when the thing that you're saying they're hypocritical in doing is like you're trying to indicate some sort of broader moral wrong that they seem to be aware of but aren't acting on. So, for example, if an anti-trans YouTuber, like say for example Steven Crowder, likes trans women, I think you can make an argument there. But the argument isn't that what he's doing is bad because he's anti-trans, because that would imply that it's bad for him to have sex with trans women, which is a bit weird. The argument is that he's lying about his positions for profit, or alternatively, that he couldn't even abide by the standard that he's assigning to other people. In those cases, while you are pointing out a hypocrisy, the issue isn't the fundamental moral difference in how you respect people based on how they see things. It's rather an incongruity between their
Do you think, do people listen to Vaush? Do they actually understand what he's saying? Vaush's audience just must be super big brain, because I would have, if I was a Vaush fan, I'd be pretty lost, and I'd be like, all right, Vaush, I think you're about to bring it home, I'm sure, but man, I'm gonna have to read the subreddit post on this tonight, because goddamn.
Anyway, then that's an argument I'm not on board with.
I just don't understand why knowledge of your wrongdoings don't result in you specifically, not like necessarily saying you get like jail time or anything like that that's for, but like you getting, or people understanding that you're coming at this position with a greater level of understanding and therefore can condemn you or say that you did a wrong action to a greater degree than somebody who was in.
Because this is hypocrisy by another name. If you're saying, oh, it's not about the beliefs you have, it's about the knowledge, and also socialists just have more knowledge about this, I assume, and capitalists don't know what they're doing when they underpay their workers. Like that, like you're essentially saying that it's hypocrisy with extra steps, yeah.
Well, not necessarily just that. It's not necessarily just that they're, specifically. I'm just assuming that they are. They're saying that they do, right? You would say that you have greater knowledge over a conservative who exploits labor you have a greater understanding of how that labor is exploited by that group than conservatives would.
I think
would
I
you
have
not?
about the same understanding of what a human being can live on
Oh my
at $9.50 an
God.
hour than many people who own and run businesses.
That's not what I asked. What
I don't
asked
think
is
they get. I
whether
don't
or
think
not...
that underpaying is more ethical because they haven't read Das Kapital. I think that what you're doing
No,
is you're,
it's not.
you're
It's not about the.
gatekeeping
It's
the
not.
moral
It's not.
It's funny how Vaush is saying he can't evaluate those things, whether or not they're. It almost sounds like Vaush is saying that there is some like objective moral standard by which you can judge things. Although maybe ultimately at the end of the day you'd say, well, no, these are just my arbitrary standards that I evaluate. But like,
Absolutely could be condemned more for that action, because you are engaging in an action that you know is wrong more than disproportionately other people. And I just want to touch on something that you just to.
It's nearly 3 hours, and I feel like we've accomplished absolutely nothing.
I know. It's getting late. You know, the sun's getting low. We gotta split ways on this. I think that your position, right? I think that your position right now in regards to this, when you just said that you have a similar level of knowledge about $9.50 an hour as a conservative, I feel like this is a bit of a misnomer. Would you say that socialists, broadly speaking, have a greater understanding of the exploitation of labor than a conservative?
What do you mean exploitation? That's a moral.
Okay. Do you think that workers understand the systems that are at socialists have a greater understanding of how the systems exploit people and exploit workers?
Wait, when you say exploit, you're again gatekeeping behind a moral presumption.
Okay.
Of course, hold on. When you say exploit, what you're saying is the only people who could have this knowledge would be people with the moral positions of a socialist, aka this is a hypocrisy argument. You're not talking about positions, you're talking about knowledge. What you're really talking about is knowledge of what exactly? Because exploitation implies a moral position of some kind.
Yes, of course. Daddy.
Okay. So in your mind, with greater information and the greater privileges and powers that come with information does not beget greater responsibility. I cannot morally condemn. Let's assume the knowledge of the ways that
what is knowledge?
An individual might feel.
What's your theory of truth?
An individual might be.
Are you a coherence loser?
Physically incapable of being able to afford luxury goods, an individual's ability to be able to afford economic, verticalization?
Hit him up with the what? Hit him up with the what, Vaush? What?
A very general understanding of poverty.
A very common talking point is amongst conservatives is that you can just pull yourself up by your bootstraps, right? Do you agree or disagree that socialists have a greater understanding of economic mobility and your ability to pull yourself up by your bootstraps than conservatives?
I don't know what that has to do with how much you pay the people who work for you.
Give him the what? What? What are you talking about? Loser? Call him a loser.
I honestly don't know.
I don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
No, because you're using moral language.
Yeah,
when you
it doesn't make any
stuff
sense.
Like class mobility, you're using like left-leaning terms. Maybe conservatives don't understand class mobility, but they're familiar with how the economy works.
Your ability to pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
So what we're talking about, the extent to which a person has faith in the idea that you can achieve economic autonomy. What are we talking about?
What are we even talking about right now? Yeah.
Your ability to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Which group do you think has a greater understanding of how this actually works in the material world? Socialists or conservatives?
Honest to God, I don't know. Socialists are stupid as shit. You know I'm on Twitter, right?
Oh my God, dude. This ain't it,
hold
dude.
on, wait. You can't. If you really think that after whatever faith you've bought in this conversation, you get to walk away with your head shaking, then you've drastically misunderstood the position that we're both in right now. Okay. Here's what's it.
Vaush thinks he's like so far ahead in this argument.
Simple questions. Okay. Do you think that a capitalist and a socialist who are both equally knowledgeable about everything are equally worthy of condemnation if they underpay their workers? Let's say they just pay minimum wage, but minimum wage is bullshit. Do you think they're equally worthy of condemnation?
I will answer your question when you answer mine in good. Like you've yet to answer.
I directly answered your question. Please just answer it. Do you think they would be equally worthy of condemnation?
Fucking answer.
Sorry, say it again.
Irrelevant.
A capitalist and a socialist with exactly equal knowledge of all things. Do you think they would be equally worthy of condemnation if they
He doesn't remember his
If
question.
they both underpay the workers.
I'm sure it was important.
If they both underpay their work, it depends on the reason why. But if they have the
All
means to be able
circumstances
to,
exactly the same. Or let's take the same person. You have an individual who is a capitalist and they underpay their workers, okay?
Yep.
But then
so
they
I
go
can
on
answer the
Twitter
question pretty
and they
swiftly.
become a socialist and they still pay their workers the same amount. Is there now a wrong being done that was not being done before?
So yeah, can
I
you
should
allow me
write
to
down
fully explain
these
this
things to talk to him about.
in full here first.
Sure.
And okay, great. So I believe that an individual who is participating in a system, let's say you're a capitalist, you think everything's above the board, right? And everything is above the board. You know, everything's perfectly normal and fine. They are exploiting their workforce or whatever, and they don't really they're like, whatever, who really cares? But then they come upon the moral realization that what they're doing is actually really incredibly fucked and it's unethical. If for them to continuously
There you
participate
go.
in that
Good job,
action
Ahrelevant. I don't know if
is
chat's giving him tips or what, but
absolutely
there we
shit.
go.
Yes,
Yes.
because you are knowingly
True.
going to go
So
from a
there's
position.
moral harm is being done before.
No,
then
no,
isn't
no,
it?
no. It's not. It's
Oh
not
my
a
god, dude. Vaush is on like the fucking act utilitarianist like AIDS shit, dude. He's like so far out on this stupid fucking normative system that it is giving him brain AIDS.
Ontology.
You're right, so
A
it'd be virtue
utilitarian
ethics
would-
in that case.
No,
Ask
a utilitarian
if
would
the only thing
also-
that matters, ask him if is it morally wrong for a 1-year-old to like throw the pacifier on the floor.
might have.
Like,
can,
this is so
gatekeep
ridiculous.
Whether or not we can morally condemn people. To a
Oh my
certain degree,
God.
right? And whether or not like their moral prescriptions and what they're abiding by. If you're talking about the material conditions don't change based on your opinions of almost anything. Your mind, the beliefs that you have don't change almost anything. However, whether or not I can morally condemn somebody for participating in an action does. Because if somebody is knowingly going like, yeah, you know what, I think it is incredibly unethical what I'm doing to these people, but I'm doing it anyway, I will morally condemn that person to a higher degree than I would somebody who's like, you know what, this is perfectly normal, this is the way that the world is, and that's perfectly fine. And that fits within my moral system. Yeah.
So in that case, wouldn't it actually be to the benefit in your moral system to make sure that person doesn't become a socialist?
No, in my opinion, because
Vaush inadvertently stumbles onto one of the funniest memes of all time, where in some churches they teach you that like if you don't have knowledge of God, then you can't actually go to hell because you never knew about God, therefore you can't go to hell for not knowing about God. But if you have a missionary come to like the new world and start preaching the word of God to people and then they don't believe in him, you're actually like significantly decreasing the chances of any new people getting into heaven just because you've introduced them to the concept of God. Like Vaush is like discovering this like kind of silly paradox in real time.
No, they would. I think you have two responsibilities once you incur the knowledge that you are doing something wrong, right? Two things actually happens when you come upon a moral realization like this. One, you recognize that what you've done throughout your past is wrong, and you have that crushing realization that you might have fucked up for over the last 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year, 5 years of your life, and that's going to be really tough to be able to deal with and to grasp and to be able to, conceptualize. This is how a lot of people can become, really stuck in their ways and what have you, and refuse to believe that like capitalism is the wrong way to do things or what have you, because like I can't be wrong. I can't have done this bad shit to somebody for 10, 15, 20, 25 years, right? So you go through that process, and then the secondary process is you having to come to grips with the fact that you need to make a change. That you need to change things.
So here's so just hypothetically, if it seems like the concern you're making is a pragmatic one, it's not about whether any extra harm is being done or the world is being made worse. It's a question of unmet opportunity. A capitalist business owner is probably fine with what's going on. A socialist business owner might be amicable to counter arguments that you could use to influence the world positively. So what we're talking about here at the end of the day isn't so much like utilitarian consequence or what should be like harmed or whatever. We're talking about the pragmatic effort of moving people over. Now, don't you think that a person might be less amicable to being moved over
if they have to do anything?
That being known as a socialist
means they have some sort of obligation
for things that they've been doing for years.
This is so stupid.
I think it depends on how.
Why would anybody become religious ever?
I think you can levy criticism in a sure, and I think but that doesn't escape the moral condemnation argument. I can morally condemn somebody in a way that doesn't have them like me shit down their chest for doing fucking anything.
Yeah, but that's not them doing something that's more bad. That's only unmet opportunity, which runs back to my argument. In that case, that's not hypocrisy in the sense. No, that is. In that case, the hypocrisy isn't you're a socialist, therefore what you're doing is more bad, which is what you said earlier. It's about the fact that being a socialist means that there's a greater action opportunity to move a person from the bad behavior that they've always been engaging in and continue to. And at that point, what we're really talking about here is not condemnation and not what's good or bad. We're talking about the most practical way to affect positive change. And that's what I've been arguing for this whole time. There are good and bad ways to criticize someone.
Let me bring back, because you were saying it was not a utilitarian argument, what I was talking about. The utility, and it is a utilitarian argument, allow me to explain, the utility in presenting the argument that we should morally condemn people who are knowingly participating in malice is to condemn people who participate in that malice in the hopes that people will participate in it less, so we may levy that criticism. We ought to make it as unforgiving for people to actively participate in what they consider to be evil actions as possible. I don't think people should
discourage people from engaging in evil actions. Whether or not they know it's evil only changes the means by which we should reach them. It's useful in that case, and there is utility in changing the way in which you approach a criticism, depending on what they know, but it doesn't actually change whether what they're doing is bad or whether or not they should be prevented from doing it. So this goes again back to my argument. It's just about the approach.
Well, relative to the person, it does matter as to whether or not it is bad. It does. Maybe not.
Why would they change their behavior if it's not bad?
Specifically.
Yeah.
It absolutely does.
Otherwise, why change their behavior?
Like you would talk to them differently. Like my way of telling Hasan to do like more socialist-y stuff would be different because there's less ground that I would have to cover. I would have to work against what I assume would be an obstinance. Whereas with like a capitalist, I would have to start with like a whole bunch of, I mean, I guess I'd have to lay out my ethical framework, or at least I'd have to make an appeal to shared values. So there are different ways of going about it to begin with, right? But that's not an appeal to hypocrisy. That's just different people with different levels of knowledge should be reached and have their mind changed in different ways. And again, I settle back on, I think the best way to reach Hasan, or any socialist who you think is doing unsocialisty stuff, would be to encourage them to do better, rather than to say like, socialists are, you're bad because you're a socialist and you're not doing it, you know?
Got him, dude. Fucking A, man. So, you knocked it out of the park with that one.
I want to hear, I guess, the substantial difference
another loser
between
crushed
the position
by
that
Vaush.
Because I could take your rhetoric, because that's what we're disagreeing on in regards to this, or at least it seems like that's the position that we're at. I could disagree or agree with your rhetoric approach towards this situation. And if I agree with it, like, and I substitute, or I fall in line with it, what's the substantial difference between our positions?
Well, I think that there are significant differences in how they affect the broader discourse, because there's there's a pretty big difference between criticism and encouraging people to do better and outright condemnation. I mean, it's huge. The whole Hasan bad thing is like this massive.
Maybe again, it has to be the word condemnation is what you're getting caught up on here.
Well,
when I'm talking
condemnation
about
does imply like you're saying a person is bad for doing or for not doing something.
There's nothing wrong with saying a person's bad for.
Not only do I not think that's true or utilitarian, but I also that's a virtue ethicist position. Because
utilitarianism follows from a position saying that there are things that you can do that increase goodness and decrease goodness. A utilitarian must acknowledge that there are some things that are good and some things that are bad. Otherwise, how are you measuring utility? Utilitarian is literally the measure of like how do we measure the goodness or whatever. I don't know, dude. Oh God, he's like an amalgamation of. He's like the fucking Anna of philosophy. That's what he is. He knows like a bunch of terms that he's clearly read before, but the way that he uses them and weaponizes them is just so wrong. Like, Jesus.
Amount of money or socialist or like it's very dumb stuff, but it does. A lot of people treat socialism like being a part of that group means you have to be some kind of, you know, wizened monk who gives up all material possessions, which no. I want there to be socialists who do whatever the fuck. I want socialists in everywhere. from Beverly Hills to fucking Monaco. I want socialists all over the world. Because to say otherwise, to say, actually, socialism is when you do this, and you can't do that, this, that, or the other, and all these other things that you like and have always done are bad, you can't do that.
Clear,
if I do that, that hurts the movement. So that I want to avoid.
To be clear, though, what you're advocating for is just people to post on Twitter. Like,
yes.
Yeah, that's the
True.
only moral obligation that they have.
Yeah.
Is like if they follow into your thing.
Can I give you another opportunity
him.
to start that sentence so that I don't absolutely just tear into you for saying something that's stupid? Do you want like a go-over?
Earlier you fucking ran into me, dude. I feel like this is getting absolutely ridiculous in the first place, man. This is like I have no obligation if I'm a socialist under the system to do anything more than to post on Twitter.
Yep.
It's the same as every other group all the time. You should do good things and shouldn't do bad things. Again, like
welcome to Tautologies 101 by Vaush.
The best way of handling things. And the only question is, how do you get people to do the good things and not do the bad things? What you seem to be obsessed with is this weird virtue ethicist, how do I sufficiently...
Sorry, so a tautology is just like saying the same thing twice, right? Like, we should do good things. A good thing is by definition something that you ought to or should do. We shouldn't do bad things. A bad thing is by definition things that you ought not do. Why would you like?
So like you seem more interested in the condemnation than whatever good you get from the condemnation. If Twitter shitposting somehow brought about the workers' revolution, then fuck yes. I don't think it will, and I'm not advocating for us to just do that, but I'm not specifically attached to any one method or approach. I have a bias against yours because I've seen how much harm it can do, both within the community and from outside of the community at the community, you know?
I just think that we can do significantly better. I don't know what to really say. Earlier you would agree that the level of like moral obligation that you would put out there is like non-existent. So I just don't know.
What do you mean by moral obligation? What do you mean by that?
What is a moral obligation?
You were saying that if you are a socialist, you don't have to do anything. Is what you're saying. You don't have to do anything. So when you say you want
do many good things.
What
do you mean by have to?
You're saying that like if I proclaim that I'm a socialist or you want socialists everywhere, that you don't have to do anything to be a socialist. You can just say, hey, I'm a socialist.
Hey, make these jobs.
Nothing's
happening.
First of all, yeah, it's a political belief, not a membership club. Yeah. And second of all, you only have to do two things. Believe in democratic ownership of the means of production.
But not do it.
Believe in partial or total decommodification of the economy.
But not do it.
Those are the two things you have to do. To be a socialist.
You believe in those things, but you don't actually.
Everything else,
you don't do anything about
them.
Shouldn't do.
Why those though? Why only those?
Because those
why
actually
not push for more?
Because those are the only things that make up the definition of socialism.
Why not expand the definition of socialism to be something that we consider to be so greater?
That's not how any political or economic system works. A capitalist is a person who believes in, free market economies, or relatively or at least somewhat free of regulation. They believe in like supply demand, like that kind of shit. And also a capitalist is a person who never pays their workers more than the median income, and they're like, what is that? Nobody does that. Why this obsession with arbitrarily attaching meaningless? You want to change the definition of socialism?
No, it's because we're trying to make arguments that inline what those core. It's kind of like, for lack of a better, it's kind of like our Constitution. It's like you establish a series of rules or guidelines, and then from there you can establish a whole list of other laws or what have you that apply in congruence with those guidelines that you believe stem from those. So, like for instance, me and you may agree on socialism being about the workers' own means production and
somebody made
socialism. Yeah, but that's the only thing that.
Somebody made a good one. Somebody did a good one. Thank you. Oh, but he sent it to me in a DM. Wait. Send me a streamable I can't download. Please, I love you. Thank you. Somebody made a good meme. Finally. Thank you. Thank God.
Build a I wouldn't say just racial, like a diverse coalition, right? Not be exclusionary towards trans people, not be exclusionary towards black people, Asian people. That is necessary for us to build a strong socialist movement.
That's not what socialism is. Socialists should be those things, but all you're doing right now, and let's be clear about it, is virtue signaling. trying to change the definition of socialism to exclude every social group you dislike does nothing other than make you feel good about having a smaller boundary than other people. It affects nothing positively. It changes the world in zero ways.
Wait,
I'm
that's
concerned
just-
about whatever I'm concerned about whatever language I can engage in produces the best outcomes.
Wait, oh
You
shit,
seem to
did
be
my
more
YouTube stream
concerned with
blip? I just
condemnation
noticed my
first,
shit got fucked.
and then whatever good outcomes you can sort of.
I think that's being a bit like.
Wait, no?
Not. I don't want to say bad.
Did it
faith, but
earlier?
I think you know that I would disagree with that. Right?
I mean, I'm sure you would say you disagree with that, but you disagreed that hypocrisy was a core element of your argument for a while too. And I mean,
I'm not asking if it's good now. I'm asking earlier if it did. Okay, never mind. I have like a thing that measures bandwidth, and it looked like it dropped.
You're being bad faith, so fuck it.
I don't think I'm being bad faith. I think that you're primarily concerned with the
don't
condemnation here, which is very strange to me.
No, and I think that the condemnation is necessary to be able to make the arguments about how, hey, we should set a standard that if people say something,
What
they
happens
should do
if
something
what happens if they
incongruent
don't
with
do
it.
that thing?
You would say that is a bad thing to do.
Okay.
Is to be a slacktivist is a bad thing to do.
And you think that with that, so hold on. Everyone says being a slacktivist is a bad thing to do. It's already a morally loaded term, okay? But there's a difference between saying that it's a bad thing to be that and to say a person is bad and worthy of condemnation for doing it. I would rather a slacktivist socialist, for example, than I would a slacktivist capitalist. So even though I don't like the slacktivism, I think that a person is making a positive change if they are a socialist for it. I would rather have a person be a, well, I don't know if I'd say bad socialist, because some socialists are so bad they start defending Stalin and shit, so I'm not going to say that.
So if they, sure. If they don't do anything, then what does it matter?
I think it's better for their mental health. Also, maybe they'll have a conversation with somebody once every 5 years, and maybe that'll influence people's perspectives a little bit. Sure.
Right, and so then we can get, I mean, that's where we get the ball rolling. I think
we
that
should
it is
encourage them
better
to do more.
I think that when we're talking about encouraging people to do more, we should set the standard, right? And again, I want to appeal to the thing that you said earlier, where you said that it would be bad if Hasan started doing less. We're not using the same language, but I think we're going to get the same idea. I think that what you're referencing there is the same thing I'm trying to get at, which is that I think that it is a good thing, personally, that we should set a higher standard. I think that's
I think that your obsession with standards and condemnation don't serve
Holy
much
shit,
of a
how much does this
functional
guy
utility.
own?
And I would respectfully request that you do so with the Soakdem and liberal communities exclusively, because
I mean, it's been working pretty well. We pay our editors.
Sure, go for it. I'm pretty sure Hasan pays his editors, but
after getting bullied for it, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. I don't think you're going to bring about any like baller outcomes with this attitude in the socialist community, you know? I don't know. It just seems like it keeps people from wanting to be socialists.
It feels like at the jump you were apprehensive to my position because you thought that I was just, and it feels like no matter what I was gonna say, you were just gonna hyper bake in the position that I'm talking exclusively about hypocrisy, and it's the exact same thing as Ben Shapiro.
You can't complain about. No, hold on, wait.
Stop it.
I never said it was the exact same thing as Ben Shapiro.
Every single time.
Hold on. We can end this conversation soon, either way.
Sure.
But I'll either remember.
Holy
you
shit,
as a
did Destiny spend a day
liar
at middle
or
school? What the fuck are
somebody I
these
have
stupid
strong
fuck
disagreements
sounds? Wait, what
I
sounds?
never said you were exactly like Ben Shapiro. I was clear and specific in the ways in which I felt your arguments of hypocrisy, which they were, which you affirmed again many times after, rang very similar to the comments that Ben Shapiro made, even if all your arguments weren't the same.
Oh my god, look at this meme.
Line of criticism is
Look at this meme. We'll take it.
So hold on, wait. First of all,
what I'm saying.
You say that. Second of all, I don't know what arguments you're making about big tech right now, okay? Because the most fervent advocates for big tech that I see I don't know if I see anywhere else. People accuse me of being big tech. I don't even know what you're referring to when you talk about that. But the arguments you're making right there are descriptive. You're making a prescriptive argument. You're saying...
What is a descriptive argument? What does that even mean? Are they arguing over what's true?
Hypocritical, and we need to hold them to a higher standard because of their moral beliefs. That is a moral statement. My factual statement that capitalists and liberals tend to get along is just...
And what you and conservatives say about liberals just kissing up to big businesses or capital owners is not descriptively true. It is you something...
Wait, anything in particular you're referring to?
Wait.
Because again, I hate to keep saying this, the hypocrisy argument is a purely moral one. If I make the argument that liberals kiss up to big tech, that's one that I can accurately substantiate with evidence in the real world. You keep conflating moral statements that are impossible to describe or to prove with things you could say that actually descriptively can be proven.
I am referencing specifically
Vaush
the argument
crushed
that people on the left like to make.
Basedified. Okay, on that one. Oh my God.
Well, we're talking about me right now.
That was so base.
Okay, listen, I've been trying to make that argument this entire time, but you've constantly referenced Ben Shapiro.
Hold on.
So
don't let
me
get away with that one, Vaush.
Make the hypocrisy argument. I criticize
and you have made the lib argument, but you don't see me going screaming about...
Please. I don't know if it's just late for you.
Okay.
Or maybe you just need a drink.
What is the lib argument that I don't like?
What is it? That liberals side with fascists?
Are informed by their complete, I don't want to say slavery, their complete, like kiss-assery to corporations.
Okay,
that their that the capital owners and what have you inform the liberals or sock dems or
I'm going to try this one more time.
We're going to do one more time. You're not keeping up, Ahrelevant.
Socialists need to be held to a higher standard or they're being hypocritical is a moral argument for which no evidence can be produced. Whereas the claims you are making right now, even if they were...
we don't do moral arguments here,
and I honestly, God, don't remember if there are any arguments I've made recently that align with those, are arguments you could substantiate with actual evidence in the real world. They're not moral arguments. They're descriptions of how the world is. Now, you can argue maybe those aren't the fairest descriptions. Okay. I don't know what specific position we're arguing here because I'm not arguing.
So is your argument that conservatives have the position that people who espouse certain principled positions ought to abide by those principled positions? Are you stating that that's a conservative position? Because that's my position. That when leftists or what have you say a certain position, that they ought to take a principled position in regards to that. That is what I'm communicating. If you believe that to be a conservative position, that's fine.
Deferring to hypocrisy rather than addressing the underlying argument.
It's bullshit.
Yes, a bland and banal
hypocrisy
is something I notice often. From
is it banal or is it banal?
Yes, I think they do it more than other groups because they have
banal.
very bad.
Oh no, it is banal.
But
holy shit!
I think that all groups do it to some extent. I think it is by definition a bad argument. Because I do not think that deferring just to hypocrisy is a sufficient response. It's borderline fallacious sometimes. Additionally, I know that people do it to other groups as well. However, I think that socialists get the back end of this the most often. Socialists and progressives.
It's almost like maybe they're the most hypocritical.
I've heard this about progressives too. What you're saying right now is like the assume my gender 2015 argument, you know? Hey, they claim to care about trans people, but here's a video of noted progressive...
I don't really like arguments about moral consistency because it seems like whenever we talk about moral consistency, people always attack my side the most for being inconsistent. So I hate those arguments. Like, what the fuck? How do you pronounce echelon? E-C-H-E-L-O-N, I think.
And that they're being hypocritical and they're not living up to the things they actually believe. And if they don't, then who else should?
That's rough, man.
And those are arguments that people have made against progressives and socialists for a very long time. They've made it for centuries. They made it during the Civil Rights Movement. They made it all the way back during the abolitionist movement when they said that abolitionists were insincere in their positions because they were not willing to personally shack up with like former slaves like roommates. This goes back so far, and it's most often made against progressives because they're the ones fighting the most against the status quo. You can't make this argument against the status quo because people who live within the status quo and believe in the status quo already abide by the morals of the status quo. It's the status quo. Socialists, by daring to believe in something a little bit better than the status quo, have these arguments thrown at them because it's easier than actually saying anything meaningful or relevant. Now, I don't think that's an entire summary of what you've said and believe. I just think it happens a lot And we probably shouldn't be doing the hypocrisy angle because historically,
because all socialists are hypocrites. It's like what he's saying, bro.
I'm of the belief that there's nothing in all of material reality I could possibly say to convince you that I'm not doing the hypocrisy angle in the way that you're describing. So I'm completely giving up on that. But I want to just, if the point of disagreement that we're going to get on is specifically in regards to, hey, I think it's pretty chill if we live by a certain series of principles or rules that we abide by, and that would be a pretty chill thing to do, then, like, hey, so be it. I'm just arguing that, like you said, how you agreed that if, like, you know, the rainbow capitalism standards were no longer in the case, I'm just arguing for higher standards. I guess I would be the one that would argue that capitalists should be going out of their way to do the rainbow capitalism in the first place, and you would just say, hey, keep up the good work, or whatever the fuck. I feel like that's just where this is at. I feel like this has devolved into absolute nonsense.
I mean, I think it started as absolute nonsense, to be fair. I just think that the mask came off, like, more and more with time. I mean, we literally agreed on the idea that the level of a person's knowledge relative to the bad things they're doing can influence the way in which we approach them. And that's purely, like, a consideration to people's, like, you know, like, the optics and the effectiveness in an argument. And I'm just taking the position that I think it's more effective if you come at them from, like, an understanding and reasonable perspective. You try to, like, talk it out with them and, like, say that, encourage them to do better.
And you could do the same thing with moral condemnation.
No. I think if you take a look at almost any, like, data on human behavioral science, I think you'll find that for the most part, affirmative, like,
he is, guys. Remember the data?
You can do affirmative positive criticism if you morally condemn somebody for an action.
What? I don't know what you keep saying by condemn. You can criticize.
Right,
let me hold on. Wait. Condemnation. I don't know why you're so obsessed with that word. The expression of very strong disapproval, censure, okay? But when I think of, like, hey, human behavioral scientists, like, how do you get people to do better behavior? My game just crashed. If you can get people to do better behavior, like, how do you do that? I don't think that word condemnation is going to come up very often. I think words like reinforcement, criticism, and incentives are going to be the big ones.
Right, because they're not concerned with the, like, saying it is a moral condemnation or what have. They're concerned with getting to the.
We already agreed. We're not talking about rules. We already agreed. We already agreed that the facts of the matter have changed.
No, stop. Because we're clearly operating under two different descriptive.
No, we're not. We agreed earlier the moral facts don't change. We're only talking about the ways in which you can appeal to people based on the knowledge they have.
We did not agree. I disagreed with that because
then you believe in the hypocrisy argument. No, I can't. Wait. I can't do it again.
I can't.
Okay, make your argument. I'm not going to respond to it.
And then we're done.
And
that's it. It's the end.
We'll do this for another 3
hours. We're gonna be here all night. It's already been 3 hours.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah, make your argument.
Make it, and then you get the last word. Yeah.
Whether or not you consider X, Y, or Z to be a moral standard that you hold other people up to, absolutely can affect whether or not people feel okay with participating in that activity, right? When we were talking previously about whether or not it would change the material matters of the way the world works, your intentions don't change the actual outcome of the action. However, we can agree that, or I would hope we could agree, the way that you can argue that people ought to be condemned or ought to be seen as good or bad or doing a good or bad thing can change based on their knowledge, right? Somebody accidentally saying the N-word who doesn't know what it means, I wouldn't condemn nearly as much as somebody who knowingly, maliciously uses the N-word because I want to dissuade that kind of behavior into the future. I'm not going to say you're doing everything pretty swell. Just, kind of don't do that shit again. No, it's like, it's going to be like, yeah, that's a pretty fucking bad thing to say. Let's not do that again. That's the way that it goes.
I guess it really depends on what's most effective,
I guess, but
I'm not opposed to condemnation as a concept. I'm opposed to the idea that that's like, it just seems like your condemnation first, results second, and I'm results first, like condemnation if necessary. And the condemnation is so obviously objectively not fucking working in this situation, apart from leading to the perpetuation of this infantile discourse where Hasan continues to make $10 trillion a day while I get to sit here defending him because people keep coming to me asking me whether or not socialism means houses. Or in your case, whether or not hypocrisy is, isn't, or in a quantum superflux might be an essential component in determining whether or not a thing is harmful.
Oh my God.
It just goes on
You got
forever
him.
and ever and ever, and it's clearly, condemnation is clearly not arriving, like we're not doing it. So the best I can do, what I'm gonna do with my platform, is I'm gonna say, hey folks, if you become a socialist, you know, all the things you've been doing before,
Just keep doing
on
it.
Twitter.
I don't know why you keep referring to that. Like there are two options, and it's posting on Twitter or saying people are bad for doing things non-socialist.
Damn.
I don't know what kind of baby
That was
brain
Vaush's
logic
chat.
that is, but that's not what I
Fuck
believe in.
off. This guy
You have
blows.
no standards
Bad
that
faith coming
socialists
out.
Need to live up to.
I
Vaush,
think that-
stop getting triggered.
I ironically think that like you should probably take a little bit of a look
Uh-oh.
at like
Oh my
human
fucking
behavioral
DGG has
therapy,
ruined this
or
person
just
something.
any research whatsoever on how to
Sure.
change people's minds on stuff or get them to do new things, because I'm pretty sure the research is in favor of me. That you're taking the moralist, like the conservative mindset, that like punishment first,
Yeah, the
like moral.
conservative mindset.
Yes,
Yeah, that's conservative.
punishment first,
Only
moral
conservatives believe in
condemnation first.
punishment.
And I'm the one saying like it may feel good to condemn, but if we set that aside, in reality, it's actually way, way, way more effective to take like the X approach or Y approach. You know, I do genuinely believe that's the case.
Okay. All right.
Well, I know it's probably going to sound incredibly sarcastic, but I actually did have a good time talking with you. So I hope you have a good night.
Yeah.
Okay.
I had a good time too, buddy. You have a good one.
You too. Bye.
See you.
Do you know I was watching the Relly Vaush debate when he brought up your Georgia canvassing? She said it was useless. Oh, nice.
Get on Destiny's ass, get on Bastiat's ass, get on Heartdan's ass. Come on.
Canvassing. That was done in Georgia.
The canvassing of 100 people in Georgia. Look at, are you hearing this? Am I going insane? 100 people canvassing, most of whom paid themselves. They paid themselves to go hang out with Destiny. Destiny didn't bankroll that thing, you fucking idiot. Come on, dude. Holy shit.
Just for the record, for the one, I paid for all the food, and two, on the last canvassing event, we paid, hold on. I paid all of the hotels as well, but okay. Also, 100 people in real life knocking on doors is a fuck ton of people. We had the largest canvassing effort in the state. That was like single party, but...
Oh god, it's like fucking being psychic.
And
Yeah, that would-
But okay, I don't care. I started writing stuff down because goddamn. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay, just. Oh no! Wait. Oh, it's okay. My game autosaves. I just shut my computer off. I accidentally hit the thing, but it's okay because it's Iron Man, so it should be autosaving, right?
Nice.
What dog shit advice have you given me on Stellaris that I now know is wrong? Can anybody remember real quick? This is the first thing I have to grill him on.
No, listen.
No, I know you've
just-
given me. I know a lot about this game now. You gave me some dog shit advice, and I'm trying to remember what it was.
Hey, yo, pull up the logs. Pull up the logs.
Pull up the logs.
I think I only remember telling you to make a custom race. Okay.
Okay.
That's and you blew up. You went thermonuclear.
Yeah, because I didn't know any of the fucking game. But okay, if that's it, then you're safe for now. Okay.
Okay.
If I lose my save shit, I'm actually gonna kill you. Okay, because somehow this is your fault. And now I deleted on the other screen the things I was gonna talk about. Okay, let's talk first. Okay, I'm not actually even talking much about your guys' argument. I just want to give you some things that I believe are true. Okay, and then you do what you want with them. Okay. So, number one, knowledge of your action can absolutely change the moral, like how we assign blame or responsibility to somebody. Right. So, for example, let's say that let's say that every day I walk out to my mailbox to get my mail, and then every day I walk back inside, okay? Let's say that somebody informs me that on my journey out, I'm stepping on a piece of grass, and on that piece of grass, there's like a whole civilization of micro people or some shit, right? Now, before, I didn't know that, so I would just walk by and whatever. Can you really, like, say that I'm, like, in the wrong for doing that? Like, I didn't know that, right? But if I did have knowledge of that, then, like, okay, well, now it's horrible. You're genociding a whole, like, civilization every time you step in your lawn. Well, that's bad. You should avoid that now, right? There's a, like, agency... The whole idea behind moral agency is that you could choose one thing or another. That's like a big part of being a moral agent. That's why when a 15-year-old hits somebody, they're in trouble, but when a 1-year-old hits somebody, they're not in as much trouble because they don't have as much agency. They don't know the difference.
Sure.
Okay, that's
I don't disagree with that.
Yeah, okay, yeah, but Vaush kept trying. Why is my mouse not? I know why my mouse isn't shut up. Oh my god, I know why. Hold on. I know why. I know why.
What's up, chat?
There it is. Okay. Jesus Christ. Okay. So that was number 1. Okay.
Yep.
God damn it! I lost all my notes. Okay. Number 2. Okay. There are 2 different types of hypocrisies that we can talk about. Okay.
Yep. Okay.
So 1, the hypocrisy of like doing a bad action. That's something that isn't that interesting that we can talk about, right? So like, oh, like this guy says that you should be nice to all people, but he flipped somebody off and then he cut them off when he was driving to work, right? Wow, you're kind of a hypocrite, right? But that's not really that interesting, right? But there's a second level that we can talk about where we say hypocrisy, but what we actually mean is like an inconsistency in your moral values.
Right. So that's what I was trying to communicate at one point. Is when a lot of people are talking about Hasan's hypocrisy, what they're really saying is like, you have like he has talked about several ideas and there's several ideas that are tertiary to socialism. That
so the problem is, we can have hypocritical people. Everybody to some extent is a hypocrite. Everybody. Nobody lives up to their ideals. That's why they're ideals. Okay, but you can't have contradictory ideals from a philosophy point of view, because from a contradiction you can prove anything. That's boring. We don't care about that. From a reasonable point of view, because if you can have a contradiction, then everybody can have contradictions, and stuff descends into absurdity immediately. Because if you can contradict that, I can contradict that, I can contradict that, right? Everything fails, right? We can't have contradictions and ideals, right? So every time Vaush kept trying to like kind of pigeonhole you into this, so you want to make a hypocrisy argument, you can say like, well, kind of, yeah, you can't have hypocritical ideals. It's okay to say it as a hypocrisy argument. That's not like a bad thing. We shouldn't have hypocritical ideals. It's really important.
Sure.
Fuck, what else was there? I'd written down like 7 things and I deleted it all. Fuck.
I imagine probably somebody in chat could get like a clip or a picture or something.
Well, no, because I just wrote it down like in a little chat on the side. I didn't have it on stream.
Rip.
A couple of like really good questions are like, oh, here's a second thing, okay? I can't even believe that I have to say this, okay? Standards are good, okay?
Yeah.
It's good to have standards, moral standards by which we hold ourselves to. And it's good that if you're part of a given movement, there are a new set of standards that somebody adopts when they join that movement. Vaush trying to say we don't want to gatekeep people by having higher standards effectively defeats any movement ever, because every single movement is necessarily going to have higher standards.
Certain standards, right?
Yeah, because you have to, because otherwise what the fuck is the point of your movement if there are no new standards? Which you can also like, that segues very beautifully into the question of what is the difference between a socialist and a capitalist in your society? Now you inadvertently asked him that question later, and I think it elicited one of the funniest responses I heard of the night, which was, well, I want them to be socialists because they'll be more mentally healthy, which is probably the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. You don't want them to be socialists because it'll make them mentally healthy. You want them to be socialists because when they assume a new set of standards, part of those new sets of standards are acting in ways that are more coherent with our moral philosophy. So like treating workers better and advocating on behalf of like labor rights and because it means that they're more likely to, part of those standards is furthering and pushing your own ideology. Most people would say that you have some sort of obligation to the ideology that you're part of to proselytize or evangelize or whatever. To some extent, you want to like encourage people to join, especially if it's like a fledgling ideology. You're trying to recruit members, right? So this, like his world where he does this thing where he's like, oh, well, I am the utilitarian, blah, 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 blah. Okay, tell him, when you argue, if you ever argue with Vaush, say, stop using philosophy terms, because holy fuck. First of all, every time he does is absolutely just mind-blowing, okay? And then just focus on like, well, what is the outcome of what you're saying? And you kind of started to hit on this, but it was like 3 hours in, so you were both tired. Where it's like, okay, so socialism is just literally posting on Twitter. That's what it sounds like. Socialism is when you post on Twitter, because you don't want to hold people to any other standard, which is ridiculous.
And that's, I mean, I don't really know what to, do you even know what to say if he just dies on that hill? Because that's what it seems like, or is that? And
then you ask him, are Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, are they socialists?
Right.
And if he says no, and you say, well, how do you know? Maybe they are.
Right. And so, I mean, I feel like his response probably from there would be just like, well, I guess I can't say for sure. They could just in their mind be a socialist or what have you, but
yeah, but it's like this is such a boring, pointless way to live your life, and I think even his audience, I don't know how like copium up they are on these answers, even his audience must know that it is incredibly unsatisfying, right? Like if I have a group of people, like even for my own community, I try, even though everybody says I'm transphobic and whatever, like I try to hold my community to somewhat of a higher standard, and I don't think that turns off people from joining my community. Like, hey, like if you say things that are, even if I hate them, if you say things that are like transphobic on Twitter, or if you engage in like crazy people, it's like I ban people for that, right? That's a standard. It's okay to hold people to that standard. You want to be in a group that has higher standards than another group that you're not in, because it's your group. Why wouldn't you want your group to have like the most idealistic standards that they can have? Like, yeah.
I don't know. It just I don't know. I felt very much I don't know. I felt like he was constantly trying to use other people's arguments against me so much, especially at the beginning. I just really was trying to keep it in a spot where I was like, because believe it or not, I do have quite a bit of content, especially recently, shitting on Hasan or what have you. I don't think he's that bad. I really don't. I think overall he is like not the worst person. Like there's a million people I could imagine that would be worse to be the largest political streamer on Twitch. Sure. There's like a million people I can imagine to be worse. I can imagine better, but I can imagine a lot worse. So I don't think he's that bad. However, when I see that he's doing something bad, I'm going to target it. But when I would bring that up, he would say, well, it's like really convenient that you're not targeting other people with it. It's like, but there's no other person that like I can realistically target in the space that I'm in. And
also you're going to work proximately to your own causes sometimes, right? Like imagine you've got a 5th grader and they're like, dude, our teacher is bullshit. This is like fucked up. And you're like, oh, well, why are you criticizing your teacher when the police chief just, decreed this horrible thing? And it's like, well, I'm not a member of the fucking police department. It's my 5th grade class, bro. Like, of course you're gonna like deal with things that are in closer proximity to you. That's always the case, right? Why would Jane complain about her mom and dad when Samantha's mom and dad are so much worse? Like, well, what the fuck? Because it's not Jane's mom and dad. Like, it's
and I was also like, I mean, I really fuck. I wish that I didn't get sidetracked on this, because I really wanted to ask him, like, can he point me to somebody? Because God, it was so. I really didn't like the appeal to the gray area. There was an appeal to the gray area.
Because if you can't draw, this is like some brain aids, dude. The crazy lefty trans people do this as well for some reason, where they'll do this thing where if you can't like draw this exact border somewhere, then they say that it doesn't exist at all. Like if you cannot, in the most precise manner possible, delineate a certain like border, then everything is everything. There's a name for this, but I don't know what it's called. But like, it's like the joke that I made when we were listening was that like, let's say I'm standing on the border between Nebraska and Iowa, and I demand somebody to tell me exactly where the border is. Where it is exactly? Oh, you don't even know? Then fuck. Then Nebraska and Iowa are basically the same thing. It's just one state. You can't draw exactly the border. You can't draw the exact thing. Then it's like, okay, well, fuck you, right? And
so I'm just, I don't know. It was really cringe for me because I felt like I had a really good foundational position, right? I wasn't talking about somebody that's making 100K excess cash, talking about like how they could use resources or a platform. And I didn't even die on the hill of resources. I didn't even die on the hill that he needs to give a penny. I was just talking about like doing a fucking goddamn fundraiser, or what have you. Right? Like just, something that we should hold people to some higher standards. But like it felt like he couldn't even break bread with me. Like when I made the argument that somebody making $1 million, $1 million USD excess at the end of the year, after taxes, after rent, $1 million excess, like that person could probably do a little bit more, and then he would constantly appeal to.
Yeah, and then he was like, "Do you have any more money? Do you have any extra money?" And it's like, bro, come on, dude.
He is a Martian compared to me. He's a Martian compared to me. We are not at all similar in any facet, and it's like I don't feel like I was being really obtuse. I wasn't talking about maybe 100K.
And it's just it's got to be so unsatisfying that like you're essentially admitting that you have like zero moral standards for your side. Like it's like, oh well, we have zero expectations of anybody. And it was funny because in a roundabout way, it's like we don't have any expectations of anybody, because we're tired of people using them against us. He almost made it sound like they didn't want to have any expectations because they can never live up to them. It's like what it almost sounded like he was saying.
Yeah, I don't know. It was a really big issue. But, all right, do you have any constructive criticism, like more constructive criticism for me or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say you have to like be very aware of like all the arguments. I think like rhetorically it was okay.
Okay.
Yeah, don't be so scared of that. Learn to differentiate the difference between like the kind of like the idealistic hypocrisy, like a contradiction of ideals, versus like an individual hypocrisy. Somebody's like, you want to make an argument from hypocrisy. It's like, okay, we're talking about like like having contradictory ideals. These are not good, right? You can't say that like we should do this and we ought to do this and society better would do this, and then like not do any of that when you have the opportunity to on an individual level. Because otherwise, why would you expect anybody else to? Especially when you're in the best position to do it. But these are like so obvious, yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, I maybe I didn't drill in that hard enough, but like, yeah, that was a big thing for me, man. If like the richest people in the world, in the richest country in the world, in the most privileged position in the world, on one of the like largest platforms in the world, can't do anything, who the fuck can?
Yeah, why
you know,
bother?
like
go join the Neil Games. At least they seem like they want to do shit. Yeah.
Yeah, like holy shit. Like I don't know what the fuck we're doing if that's the case, and I don't know. Maybe I was just like, maybe the word. It seemed like we got caught up a lot on the word moral condemnation. I should have just dropped that shit. Should have just stuck with like I guess criticism, what have you. It's I don't know, it was a really big issue. Are you playing robots, by the way?
No, I'm building them on my planet. Okay, why would I play robots? Yeah, it's for cringe losers.
Okay. Any Robo fans in chat? Yikes. All right. No, I don't know, man. I was hoping that was going to go a lot better. I didn't want that to devolve into the situation that it was. I was really hoping that it was, at the very least, I was hoping that if it was going to devolve, it wasn't going to devolve into a place where it seemed like it'd be difficult to have another conversation again, because I don't know how realistic it's going to be that we have another conversation again.
It's not like you guys were screaming at each other horribly or anything, right? Like it went okay.
Yeah, I don't know. It feels very, very, very not great. Considering that's like the first time we've interacted, but I don't know. Yeah, I don't know, I just can't. I think I needed, a greater understanding of, like, why we need the, moral standards, I guess, and, like, why...
Yeah, because you're not used to answering a question like that, right? Oh, that was another thing, yeah. It's good to be able to condemn things morally, because from condemnation, like, we can create ought statements for how people ought to act in society. That's why we have it. Oh, and you started to hit on this. I don't know if your chat was talking to because I was screaming this a lot. You started to hit on this when you were talking. Moral condemnation doesn't have to mean, like, screaming at somebody on the street. Like, moral condemnation could be like, hey, like, you get the money, probably be cool to pay your editors. Like, that can be like a front, right? If we say that it's morally, righteous to do a particular thing, or it's morally condemnable to not do a certain thing, yeah. And also, he was trying to give you these black and white examples. Things can be like simultaneously like good, and there can be bad parts to them as well. The example that I gave was like, let's say that I borrow $100 from my friend and I'm supposed to pay him back. Let's say that I only pay him back $50, right? In a way, that's good and bad. It's good that I gave him $50 at least, but it's bad that I didn't give him the full 100, right?
Yeah.
Incoming
transmission.
Yeah, I don't know. Incoming transmission.
Just, damn shame. But I don't know, man.
Okay. Well.
maybe things will go better in the future and shit like that. But yeah, I know. I went into that hoping something else would happen a little bit better, but. Yeah,
well, it happens. Things are what they are,
Yeah, I guess so.